All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Jeff Johnson, with Real Estate Journals and Minnesota Real Estate Journal. Thank you for showing up today and attending our 10th annual Minnesota Real Estate Journal Data Center Summit. So thank you to all of you for joining us here today. A couple quick announcements before we do get this program started. I know there's some people that are joining us from outside of Minnesota and from other parts of the Midwest and down into Texas as well too. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for participating in today's program. Without these sponsors, we would not be able to host these webinars on a regular basis. And we are really, really excited to getting back out there in person to doing in-person events. So, so thank you to our sponsors, the City of Elk River, Anoka County Regional Economic Development, Excel Energy, AFCOM, Great River Energy, Connexus Energy, and T5. Thank you so much to our sponsors for being sponsors of our 10th annual Data Center Summit. This is who we are. We're not just Minnesota Real Estate Journal anymore for people here in Minnesota. Across the Midwest, we also have Midwest Real Estate News, Illinois Real Estate Journal, Chicago Industrial Properties, and our new product down in Texas that's actually been around the Texas market for 30 years, Red News, which is a commercial real estate trade journal that covers the entire state of Texas. All right, so here we go. Taking the lead and kicking off our program is Dan Peterson. Dan is with CBRE. You'll see Dan's contact information here. If you want to reach out to Dan after the event, during the event, whatever it might be, feel free to do it this way, or you can just simply write a note to him in the chat room. Is totally fine with us as well too. So why don't you take it away, Dan, and it's all yours. I'm going to turn my camera off, so hopefully you're the only one on screen. Here we go.
Cool. Thank you. Good morning. And thanks, Jeff. I'm just going to get my mug off and share my screen. So hopefully this is what you see now is a splash screen for what I have up. Bear with me a quick second. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Happy to be here and looking forward to hearing from the other panelists today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data center market this morning, talk about where we've been, what's been going on, and what we think may happen in the near future, at least in this year. This will be primarily a perspective of the multi-tenant data center market, but I'm going to touch on some trends affecting all kinds of data center users. So it's been an interesting last 12 to 18 months, as everyone knows, 2020 and the pandemic. The big question we had going into this is what was going to happen. Did we hit the gas or did we pump the brakes? And what happened in the last year, I guess, depends on who you are. But for the most part, what it feels like is we've been hitting both the gas and the brake at the same time. And I thought of this kind of scenario or this metaphor and thought of a situation I had in high school. And this beauty that you see right here is my 1970s Mercury Montego. And, you know, if I simultaneously pushed on the gas pedal and the brake at the same time, I could do a brake stand and spin my wheels and burn some rubber. Not advisable for your young drivers out there, but it was pretty cool for me. And the metaphor rang true for me in that I think for the least part of the pandemic, the data center market feels like it's been doing a brake stand. Now, I don't think we've peeled out just completely yet, but hopefully the next few slides I have will help explain where I think we're going.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
If you can hear me, but we're not seeing your screen right now. You may want to try to reshare it.
My goodness. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
It's a shame that you can't see this wonderful car. Now do you see it?
Yep.
All right. There we go. I'll give you all a minute to absorb that beauty. Thanks, Jeff. All right. So as you can see on the chart on the left, at the onset of the pandemic, the sudden increase in online activity for business, school, and entertainment drove a surge in internet traffic, about 30%. Billions of connected devices became even more important to live, work, and entertain during the lockdown. A couple of examples, certainly what we're using today, the Zoom application, active daily users on this platform grew by 30x. And another stat that worth mentioning is the consumer e-commerce market, and that grew close to 30% in 2020 as well. So digital infrastructure responded accordingly to this do everything from home, and cloud service providers grew 37% in 2020. Remote working amplified the importance of data centers with cloud exchange environments. Although we tapped the brakes on wholesale demand, as you can see from the 11% on the right, COVID accelerated hybrid IT strategies, and 41% of enterprises we surveyed increased their interconnection services. The takeaway of all this was that operators continued to develop more inventory, and a larger pool of investors sought out opportunities in the data center space. One clear winner in the data center space last year was the REITs. Data centers were on the top, as you can see on the right here, performer sizably ahead of the other bright spot, which was industrial. Numbers on the left here show that the combined market cap of the technology REITs were comparable to the combined total of the traditional REITs in 2020. Looking at the national market as a whole, 17 million square feet of new inventory was built last year, and at the beginning of this year, 476 megawatts was under construction. The two big players in these categories were the cloud service providers, and you can see here at 57% of that inventory that was built, and then Northern Virginia, which is the behemoth of 61% of that what's under construction today. Continuing a previous trend on pricing, the pricing fell year over year, but the interesting thing here is that 2020 showed signs of stabilization because there was really no major change from the first half to the second half of the year. So moving on to the players in the market, hyperscalers continued to dominate. They continued to lease at wholesale co-location data centers across all markets, as well as many of the cloud service providers continued to acquire more land and build their own data centers in selected regions of the country. If you look at the slide here, you can see who we're talking about with these hyperscalers, our cloud service providers, the Amazons, Google, Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, etc. One big note there, the largest player last year was Microsoft by far, leasing 225 megawatts in multi-tenant data centers, and I'll touch on that in a second. The internet companies, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, Netflix, ByteDance. ByteDance was the big one last year, otherwise known as TikTok. They leased 134 megawatts in North America in 2020. Now, if these guys aren't building their own, they're leasing in large, whether it's hyperscale or sometimes wholesale co-location facilities. And some of the groups and names you may recognize here: Digital, Realty, Align, CyrusOne, focusing on the hyperscale, QTS, Stream, DataBank, and others focusing on that enterprise or wholesale colo market. And then Equinix, Cologix, CoreSite, and others that are focused on the interconnection or retail colo segment. Now, looking at the primary market fundamentals, you can see here's the primary markets that we track at CBRE: Northern Virginia, Dallas, Silicon Valley, Chicago, Phoenix, New York Tri-State, and Atlanta. As you can see from these numbers, Nova continues to be the place that we continue to push the gas pedal. They've benefited from a long history of connectivity, strategic location, and favorable business conditions that have just kind of fed on itself. Now, closer to home, Chicago has seen a surge in activity, partly due to their new sales tax exemption and partial tax credit for construction wages. Long and the short of it, in the primary markets, all inventories have gone up and all vacancies have gone down, with the exception of Chicago, which again has seen kind of a surge in more building as of late. On the secondary market, activity. It's been a similar theme, but only on a smaller scale. And you can see the names that we track here on the secondary front: Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Southern Cal, Seattle, Denver, Boston, Charlotte, and us in Minneapolis. Two that are not on here that are emerging markets that will probably join in the next year are Hillsboro, Oregon, just outside of Portland, and Quincy, Washington. That's halfway between Seattle and Spokane. Both of these areas have seen an increase in development and recent interest from the service providers and the hyperscalers. Cost of power is conducive out there, and they're also gaining some market share from some of the other higher priced markets in their proximity. Portland taking some of Silicon Valley, for example. On the home front, it's been a continual slow and steady absorption in 2020 since coming off our large spikes in inventory creation and lease ups from a few years back, as you can see here. We're now actually at the point where vacancy has gone down enough that in some cases, operators are planning, building, and expanding new capacity. DataBank, Flexential, T5 are all in the process of creating new capacity in 2021. We've also heard of other out-of-market providers consider potential expansion for Minneapolis as well. More of this kind of activity can be expected if we see larger tenant requirements come into the Minneapolis market going forward. Kind of on that same theme of trends and trends we see going forward, as I mentioned earlier, hybrid IT is becoming a widely adopted strategy. Many companies are finding the best data center solution is a blend of on-prem, colo, and cloud services. They can distribute workloads more efficiently and safely over a network of options and not just all in one. For example, an enterprise user can use an on-site data center for a disaster recovery option, a co-location data center for a higher compliance workload, and a cloud solution for development or episodic or seasonal needs. This trend is steering activity towards interconnection sites and secondary markets, as well as larger cloud service provider leases in primary markets. Again, it's what we've seen really be the evidence of this trend over the last 12 to 18 months in all markets. Now, I guess I wouldn't be doing the service of what really drives a lot of this unless I mentioned data growth. I mean, it kind of goes without saying that the ever-growing role of data plays in everything we do is resulting in exponential growth. Compounding this will be artificial intelligence and 5G and other technologies that really are driving the number of connected devices, in some estimates, to more than double in the next 5 years. So we really don't see any slowing in sight. And it's sometimes a little hard to wrap your head around exactly how exponential some of this growth might be. But one of the interesting echo effects of this is what this means for data gravity. And if you're not familiar with the term, data gravity is the principle that large amounts of data attract applications, services, and other data. The gravity itself is the quantity and speed at which services, applications, and even customers are attracted to data increases as the mass of the data also increases. Over the past few years, cloud computing has emerged as a major center of this data gravity alongside traditional IT enterprise environments. Now, with the pervasiveness of data, we are also starting to see the emergence of another center of gravity, the edge. The primary reason edge computing platforms are becoming centers of data gravity is because of the nature of the applications being deployed. Latency sensitive applications need access to large amounts of data to drive a business outcome in real time. The effect of data gravity in certain markets will benefit data center use and development where a higher concentration of data intensive industries are located. Just as a side, there's one service provider that actually tracks this. And it's interesting that based on the concentration of certain industries, that these data gravity hubs are not necessarily where you would think they would be aligned with primary data center markets. So it's another reason why we think there's going to be a larger disbursement of development for data centers across all markets. On the leasing front, multi-tenant data center demand is expected to see growth due to the favorable supply and demand that's been pent up from 2020 now into 21. Enterprise will get off the brakes, more so probably that we think it's going to be in the second half of the year from what we've seen so far in this first half of the year. And the hyperscale will continue to hit the gas pedal. The data center leasing market as a whole is expected to average double-digit growth over the next 5 years. Markets with strong telecom and network and competitive utility rates and tax incentives will attract more data center development going forward. Looking into the data center itself, dynamic ecosystems will be more in demand as our wheels spin forward. A secure environment where all the players meet via cross-connect, on-ramp, or software-defined network will give tenants multiple options in one location and across one provider's portfolio. Now, as you can see on the chart here, according to CloudScene, who tracks the ecosystem of a data center and who's leading that race, here in North America, you can see Equinix, Digital, CoreSite, Lumen, Cologix as the top 5, and who those players are that are offering that element of service offering, the tenant mix, and customer draw as it relates to basically being a one-stop shop for enterprise tenants. Other multi-tenant data center trends we see becoming more important going forward are customer-centric monitoring and provisioning applications for users to better manage their sometimes remote or distributed deployments. Let's say we have a data center in Chicago and we're here in Minneapolis. The fact that we can actually see onto the floor at the rack level, at the U level, what's going on, and have some level of autonomous provisioning, whether it be ordering cross connects or remote hands. The more interactive that pane of glass is getting for those customers in the data center, the more compelling it is for those folks to be able to work in multiple locations around the country, if not the world. We really see that almost as becoming table stakes these days, and certainly have seen it become active request on most of the requirements we've dealt with in the last couple of years. Certainly pricing has reflected a competitive landscape across all the markets and types of providers. We've seen some compression. As I mentioned before, we saw some prices falling, but we think they're stabilizing certainly in our market at this time. But more about the pricing, it's more about the contractual spend, and the portability of contractual spend has emerged as one way operators can provide more options for customers to stay longer with that one provider. In other words, where they may be in a colo component today, they may move to a more managed service model down the road, but they don't want to be penalized for the commitment that they have on the contract level. And so if they can do that with one provider through their portfolio of services, that allows them to see a little further down the path with certainty that they can stay with that particular operator. So kind of did a quick download of a lot of things there, but the takeaways that for things to watch in 2021, the enterprise and the cloud are going to continue, cloud folks are going to continue to lease. The cloud and the colo folks are going to continue to build. The hybrid IT strategy is something that we think will lift all boats. In other words, we think there's a place for everyone to play in that in the data center space. The effect of data gravity and the proliferation of edge is going to draw more action into the secondary and tertiary markets, certainly like ours. And the two themes of flexibility and a diverse connectivity ecosystem is going to be what wins in the colo game. Certainly going to be drawing more looks than single solution providers in the data center space as we see it here and going forward. So with that, that was the quick run through, and certainly would be happy to take questions, take them offline. If you are interested in getting a copy of our latest report on data center markets and trends going forward, or we recently completed an investor sentiment survey that was very interesting as it related to investors in the data center space. One call out there was that they saw Minneapolis as one of the, 38% of them surveyed said that they were interested in finding opportunities in Minneapolis. Or if you just have specific questions or thoughts you want to share, just feel free to contact me. There's my number, there's my email, and I'll certainly stay on the rest of the conference to answer any questions.
All right, excellent, excellent, Dan. So could you unshare your screen? And that, oh, awesome. You were reading my mind here. So as we kind of, before I introduce the next panel, I do want to share my screen here and show everybody that this will be a really nice resource for all of you that are attending this event, who are interested in connecting up with the speakers after the fact. On our, if you go back to the virtual lobby, which you all received a email from Abby or Alyssa yesterday and this morning before the event started, you'll see that our virtual lobby, and in our virtual lobby, you're going to see all of the speakers and all the panelists for all the panels, and then you can easily connect up with them. So, so if you wanted to connect up with Dan, didn't know Dan, you can just click on his LinkedIn profile and you can go ahead and connect up with them. Also on here, you'll be able to get information. You can click on and get access to information on some of our sponsors for the event. And then also we're going to be putting a replay. Usually takes us about 4 hours or 48 hours, excuse me, after the event. And we're going to put a replay of this event onto this virtual lobby. So then call it by Friday this week, you can go back in and rewatch this same webinar again if you want to listen to any of the speakers, or if you had to jump out for a few minutes. So Dan, if you can go ahead and turn off your camera, and then I'm going to bring on the other panelists. So panel number 2, we have Jeff Gilmer and also Mark Statz and Bruce Saylor. So gentlemen, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn off the my video as well too, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Jeff, I think, are you taking lead on this panel, I believe?
Yeah, I will, along with Bruce and Mark. Are they available? Are they on the line right now, Jeff?
I see. No, they are not. Neither of them are on. So I will, if you want to start talking and kind of start your presentation and start chatting, we will try to find both of them. Okay, hang tight here. So if you want to.
Yep, I will get things going here. I'm going to get my screen ready to share and we'll get the presentation up. So give me 1 second here. So Jeff or Dan, can one of you, can you see my screen? Just want to make sure it's there.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Okay. So we'll wait for Bruce and Mark to join us here. But what we're going to talk about while we're waiting for them, you can kind of see on the screen is, as Dan mentioned earlier, there's a lot of growth happening right now in the data center world, and a lot of people looking to build and develop new data center locations, even technology type locations or other aspects of it. What we're going to talk about here is when you're actually looking for a site that would be suitable for a data center in that growth, what are some of the key differences between a data center site and a traditional site? And these are some of the key questions that people ask. You know, what is really a tech site model? How should we be modeling to identify and understand what is really needed for a data center site? And, you know, industry wise, there are different industries, and different industries require different components within a data center, basically different levels of redundancy and criticality. And that comes into play when you're looking at the site as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about when is actually a study appropriate. there are different levels of sites. There are shovel-ready sites. There are sites that are so-called data center certified. And then there's the level of when a study is completed, which we're going to talk about, that brings into modeling related to the financial characteristics and other things around that particular site. And we'll share some of that on an example site in Minnesota today. And then the last part there are the risks related to that site. So I see Bruce is on. Bruce, I just did a quick overview. I'm going to flip it over to you now at this point. If you want to talk a little bit about the Minnesota Tech Corridor and some of the things and kind of how we got engaged and why we did a modeling of this particular site in Centerville.
Sure, will do. And basically how the Tech Corridor started, the concept really was at Connexus Energy, we would receive requests either throughout the state or Great Area MSP or others for certain technology companies that were looking for specific things for their sites. And what we learned over the last few years is they kept landing on a certain area as far as what their needs were. So we decided, instead of waiting for the phone to ring, is to proactively go out and really promote this corridor because of the assets that we have in the region. So we reached out to Anoka County and Sherburne County, or Washington County, get their thoughts on it. They thought it was great. Then we reached out to the 5 different cities, Centerville, Columbus, Forest Lake, Hugo, and Lino Lakes. They thought it was a great idea. So between the collaboration effort of all of us, we created the Minnesota Technology Corridor to really focus on this part of the region that has project sites anywhere from 20 to 250 acres, a lot of fiber, water, and power access, and of course, within 20 to 30 minutes of Minneapolis, St. Paul. So we're excited to create this corridor. We're getting a lot of interest and traffic in it right now, and we're just excited right now to really talk about the next level of where we're bringing the tech corridor. We've all heard about shovel-ready attributes to it, but I think this study that we're doing with Excipio is taking it to that one next level with that.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit more into the specifics of what are some of the key criteria for a particular site. And again, as I mentioned, or Dan mentioned earlier, there's a lot of growth happening. Minnesota is an area where there are a lot of people looking to enter with data center. And it doesn't just apply to a data center site, even though that's the focus of our discussion today, but it also relates to technology. Certain technology sites and other sites require some of the same types of things. This is a list of the 5 key criteria, right? Disaster avoidance is critical when you're talking about a data center. Data centers have to be up and operating 7 by 25 by 365. If you think about it from your own perspective, if you look at your phone and you can't get email on your phone for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, many people start to panic, right? Well, that email is coming from a data center. So disaster avoidance and uptime in the data center are critical. The second component to that is network access. It doesn't do us any good if the data center is up and running, but again, with our phone to look at our email, we can't access it through the network. So network access is a critical component when you start to look at a particular site. The other aspects to it are around financial investment and return. And there's really 2 categories that we'll talk about as we go through here. But one is, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation by Dan, about providers. There's a lot of providers looking to construct and build data centers. Well, they have to be able to provide a competitive rate to their clients. And in the same respect, they have to generate a profit or they won't be around very long. So financial investment and return are critical, and what site you pick can have a huge impact on that. The other criteria is, let's say you're a corporation and you're looking to build your own internal data center. Well, you need to really construct that and understand the cost and the financial investment and return to satisfy your organization. And what you're looking at is a data center is not going to generate revenue for a company. So what the real factors you're looking at as a company is, what is the lowest cost, lowest risk I can construct and operate my data center and still meet my business requirements. So that's where financial investment comes in as well. We'll talk a little about tax structure and incentives. We're going to use this model of Minnesota. Many states have different tax structure and incentives. Minnesota happens to have some of the best tax structure and incentives for data centers. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the last thing is your economic cost of power. How does that come into play? And that's an interesting example that we'll talk about, because people have a tendency to look at just at the cost per kilowatt of power in so many cents per kilowatt that they're paying for it. When in the reality, by the time you take in the tax structure and the incentives, the raw cost of power may seem higher than another location. But when you take the incentives in place, it might actually net out to be less. And that's one of the key things about the site we're going to look at here today. So, key risks and benefits. Everybody thinks about all of the geographical issues, right? Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanoes, snowfall, ice. This is a chart that just shows the United States, and it gives you an idea of where all of these things are. Of course, we're talking about a site in Minnesota. Really, the biggest risk you have here is you have a slight risk of tornadoes, and you have some risk related to ice and snow accumulation. Not great factors that really impact a lot, meaning they're not things that are going to have a significant impact. They're actually pretty minor when you look at the reality of it. And even from a tornado perspective, you know, there's data centers in Oklahoma, Missouri, you know, Kansas City area, and they're constructed to handle the tornado aspect of it. So that's something you can deal with. The snow and the cold actually is a benefit. And in this particular model, when we ran the modeling of this data center, there's over 5,000 hours, almost 5 months of free cooling for this data center. So now when you start to look at the cost of the data center, if you just look at the overall cost and compare Minnesota to, say, Texas or Arizona, the cost of cooling here is going to be less. So maybe the cost of power is higher, but if you're going to consume 50% less power because you're going to use free cooling to cool for 5 or 6 months of the year, your actual consumption of power and your raw cost of power is lower, even though the rate might be higher. So that's what we get into when we really start to look at the sites and look at the modeling. And that's something that you really need to think about when you're trying to figure out and determine what type of data center site you want to look at. Then you can see in the lower right, there's other things that are kind of man-made issues that you really need to understand as well, from being near military bases or airfields to distances from rail lines or natural gas lines or other things. There's other man-made obstacles that could be a risk to a data center that we think, oh, you know, I want to be right next to the freeway if I'm a shopping mall. Well, you don't necessarily want to be right next to the freeway if you're a data center, and it's due more to if they're transporting, you know, there's a tanker truck and it has a fire, it has an issue, and it's right on that freeway and it's next to your data center. You don't want to have that happen, as an example. And you don't want to have it next to a mall, but a mall wants the visual part of it. Most data centers, they don't even have the name on the data centers. They may not even have the, you know, the address may not even be published because of the security aspects of it. So there's different characteristics from a man-made perspective that kind of come into play as we start to look at where the location is and the site location is for that. In the case of Minnesota, which we're talking about here, very positive from that perspective. You can see there's very little or very small risk profile from that, from locations within the Minnesota area. This is the city of Centerville site. That's where it's located. So there's some key attributes to this particular site. The site is shovel ready. It's located in Anoka County. It's located in a traditional industrial park. From a power perspective, there are 2 different power providers that can provide power to that. Bruce, obviously from Connexus Energy, they are one of the sources of the power. And actually there is a substation available right within the location. There's currently 3 megawatts of power available, which when you talk about a data center build for power from megawatts, you generally want somewhere between 1 and 3 megawatts available immediately. And then as you expand, you're going to increase that power. And in this particular model, this actual location, as we built out the model and built out the different data center characteristics, we were able to expand that up to over 17 and even up to close to 30 megawatts of power over time could be available for this site. So what that means is, if you're a data center provider, you can start out with a certain size of a data center facility. Let's call it what we typically call them data center halls. And you start out with your base case with that amount of power, and then you can build a second hall, a third hall, and a fourth hall. This site has the availability to do that, which means that as you grow as a data center provider, you only spend your funding based on the demand of the data center, but you need to have the flexibility to grow over time. The second thing is, if you're a corporation and you want to look at this as a corporation, First of all, this site offers 3 different models. When we looked at it, it can be a local corporation that only needs a certain size of a data center from a power perspective and a size perspective. It could be a regional type company that wants a larger, slightly larger, medium-sized data center that would fit it. It could be a large enterprise, global, national or global corporation. This site fits all 3 of those characteristics, and the site allows the construction of the actual data center to meet any one of those particular sizes as you go along. There's also multiple fiber providers. As I mentioned earlier on, network is key. If you don't have, if there's no network access to the data center, it doesn't do any of us any good. We can't connect to the data. And Dan talked earlier about large amounts of data in the data center and the ability of that data. Well, guess what? The network providers and the ability to access that data are critical with the type of bandwidth and the other things that you need. And that's what we look at in the sites. We look to identify, are there multiple providers? And most importantly, do those network providers have the ability to access the data center from 2 different geographical directions? There's a lot of them that can come in on a common place, and that's okay. You've got redundant providers, but you also need redundant access. And in this particular location, it happens to be located with Highway 61 and 35E to the east and 35W to the west. Well, the network providers come up the major freeway. They come up those major entrances. So this has access from the west and access from the east for the fiber providers, which is critical when you start to look at redundancy and the connectivity of it. There's currently 20 acres available, and there's additional acreage for future use as well. So Jeff, do you know, is Mark on from the city of Centerville? I don't know if I don't see if he's here yet or not.
Yeah, I'm here, Jeff.
Oh, there you are, Mark. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about the city of Centerville and some of the characteristics and others that you've got about this as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. First of all, my name is Mark Stotts. I'm the city administrator and city engineer for the city of Centerville. We're a town of 4,000 people in Anoka County here. And as Jeff mentioned, our site is well situated geographically between the 2 freeways. Just north of us, the 2 freeways come together and just become I-35. And this site, again, is in the middle of those 2 freeways, and so provides great access both for transportation and as Jeff mentioned, the power and network capabilities come from different directions as well, and different providers. What I wanted to talk with you just about a little bit today is just the fact that the city of Centerville and all those that are joined into the Minnesota Technology Corridor are unique in that we've decided amongst ourselves that we're looking to help data centers come to our city as opposed to just reacting to them. So we're out ahead of this curve a little bit, and we're ready to provide the things that data centers need. And so we've positioned this site and others along the corridor to be ready for those data centers when they're ready to come in. We're also ready to take on high technology industry. So it doesn't just have to be a data center necessarily, but it could be some other large data user. So perhaps an engineering firm or other people that might need high internet speeds. And then the other thing that we wanted to kind of highlight about our site and our corridor and just remind you that what's important about when you're looking for a data center site is that the cooperation and the ability of the city that you're working for, the government you're working for, whether it's county, state, or local government or federal government, you want to see that they're flexible, they're nimble, and those types of things. And so really when it comes down to it, the last sort of hurdle you have is going to be zoning at the local level. And that's the city's responsibility. Federal government, the state government, even the county don't generally, if you're in a city, don't get involved in zoning. And so really it does come down to those local officials and the kind of trust that you can put in them to shepherd your project through that process. So you want to make sure that you're operating in a manner with these local officials that you can trust, that you can be sure that your data center is going to be welcomed there and going to be something that that you can trust for a long time, that your business is going to be welcomed there. So that's what we provide in Centerville, we think, and we think our other partners in Anoka County provide that as well. Getting outside of the main metro area a little bit tends to give you a little bit more of that that local feel and small town feel, and those officials that are genuinely welcoming to you. And so we're very proud of that, and we're excited to see this corridor progress in its development. Finally, I'll just cover, because I'm an engineer, just the sewer and water type of issues. And again, this parcel and all the ones on the corridor, there are plans in place for sewer and water. In this particular case, this site already has sewer and water. You can see on the kind of in the middle of the site, or on the south end of parcel F there, that there's a street. That street has sewer and water in it. It's ready to and set up to handle anything that the data center would need, and or any other business complex. And it's sort of a build to suit site. It's pad ready. The kind of the mess you see over there on the right hand side of the site is actually a black dirt processing facility that is on its way out the door. So it's a very pad ready site, and I think that's something that we all acknowledge in the industry, that developers aren't looking for a big mess on their site to clean up. They want to have a pad ready site. And so as if you're someone who's helping someone create a site that's ready for a data center, certainly traditional pad ready is a big factor as well, as long as you have the other things going for you, which is the things that Jeff has been talking about. So I think I'll stop there and turn it back over to Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And by the way, we'll have Bruce and Mark's contact information at the end here, should you have any questions, or we'll take questions at the end as well. So let's talk a little bit about why a data center study. What is so big, or what is so different about, why do you really want to do a study on the site before you begin to look at construction, design, or even looking at picking a site for a data center? There are some significant differences with a data center versus a traditional building. And what we've tried to do here is color code those. As you can see on the left in the blue is really a traditional building. You're looking for land and develop. At land and development, you're looking at really the facility construction. How much space do I need? How much square footage do I need? How much access do I need for parking? What do I need for office versus warehouse versus maybe industrial or lab or manufacturing? There's all of those different aspects of it. You do need network access, but network access at a data center, as we'll talk about, is much different than just traditional network access. You do need power. You're always going to need power for lights, for facilities, for operations, for industrial, mechanical type of things. And you need a water supply. So those are your normal characteristics. And when you look at what would be considered a shovel-ready site, it's going to have power, it's going to have water, it's going to have network access, right? As Mark described about the site up above. It's traditionally going to come in where your streets are, your local areas at, and those aspects. Now let's talk about a data center facility. What does a data center facility need? So let's talk in the terms of power, right? A normal industrial building may never even get to 1 megawatt of power. A data center could get into the tens of megawatts of power, even more than that. So you need the increased power. Now with the increased power, it's not just as simple as turning the power up like a dial, you might think on a dimmer switch on a light. It doesn't work that way. You've got to have overall the infrastructure. So the size of the wiring, the size of the capability, where the substations are located, where the transformers are located. There's a whole bunch of other aspects. And obviously Bruce could do a great job of describing this in greater detail if you have a question at the end. But it's not just your normal type of power that you run to the building. So you need to make sure it has the capability. The other thing to realize is power is traditionally set up in a grid or in a section. It is possible, and it has happened, where people have picked a site, they've constructed a data center, and 5 years down the road, they need additional power, and there's no more available power for their particular grid area or their section area. So now you've made this tremendous investment into a particular location, but you're stuck with the size of data center you can have there. You're limited. So you've got to look beyond just what's current for power or what's current for capacity to what is it going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. Now realize, we all know that if you start to look down the road in technology, 5 years from now is a long time. 15 years is eternity. But you've got to understand what is possible and what are available and what is there. The other thing is the network access. You need the bandwidth for the network access. So again, while you might have traditional consumer-based internet access, or even a little bit higher business aspect to a traditional building, you're going to need greater network access and from multiple providers. So you've got to look and see what providers are there. Now, the network access and the providers and how it's being provided can have a huge impact on how much compute power, or what you see there is what's called rack density. How many computers, how many servers, how much storage, as Dan talked about earlier with the increase in all this data and storage, can you put within that data center, right? That's critical. Because if you can't get to the density and you can't get to the high storage and you can't get all of that in there with the network access to it and the power to support it, it becomes cost ineffective. The greater density you can achieve in a data center, the more cost effective it is. The lower the operating costs are, the more efficient it is. So these are all different types of things that you have to look at. There's other things, physical security. Commonly around a data center, you're going to want to have 150-foot standoff fencing around that data center. So when you start to look at the geographical area and the amount of acreage that you need, while the data center might be a relatively small physical building, you're going to need space to put out that physical security around that particular data center. Disaster risks, I kind of talked about that earlier up. You want to look at both man-made and the others. And then you've got to look at all the extra parts besides just the building. So if you think of it this way, in a data center, the conditioned raised floor where the servers, the storage, the computing power, the network, where all that equipment is stored, is typically only 40% of the building. The other 60% of the building, so well, some of it is, you know, your office and your common area space and your bathrooms or other things that you have to have. The bulk of it is your space for your generators, for your power distribution units, for your UPS systems, your uninterruptible power supply. So if there's a power outage, it can be maintained. It's for your HVAC, for your cooling, for your heating. Although in a data center, the heating is mainly in the office, the cooling is what's really going to happen within the compute area, in that raised floor area. Different types of suppression and different types of detection, whether it's water, whether it's fire, whether it's heat, whether it's particle. There's a whole bunch of other types of things that get involved in that. Well, you have to have a place for that equipment. Now, in Minnesota, with the different weather variances, you have extreme, you know, it can be 100 degrees in July and it can be minus 40 in January. In Minnesota, traditionally, a lot of that equipment is going to be split, meaning some of it can be outside in a yard type area, but a lot of it needs to be in a mechanical and electrical space that is more temperature controlled, more humidity controlled within a building. You want it concealed in there. Some of it just can't be out in that type of weather environment. So as you start to look at your building and you look at your design, you have to look at the site and make sure the site can accommodate those types of differences. Completely different than a traditional building where you build a building and you might put an air conditioner on the roof and you're done type of thing. It's not that way when you get into a data center that has to have chillers in a certain area. And like I mentioned, free cooling. So there's different types of chillers or mechanisms that you may have. There's piping that has to get to those chillers that then has to get back to the data center room, and it has to be efficient. It has to be redundant. You have to have multiple piping rather than a single piping for just maybe air conditioning in a building. So all of these things, as you start to look at the overall data center, it has an impact on the site that you pick. It has an impact on your overall cost of the data center, because building that traditional building, that's the low inexpensive part of it. Building it into a data center, you're talking multiples of expense that are going to be invested into it. And then from there, you're going to want to look at your ongoing operating costs. So you don't just look at the capital costs to build that data center on a site. You've got to look at what is it going to run this data center over time, because the cost of operating a data center is going to exceed the capital investment very quickly. It's not as simple as a traditional building and I get the power bill monthly and I pay it. I get the phone bill monthly and I pay it, or the network bill monthly and I pay it. It's much more complicated because of all these other components to it. So the bottom line behind all of this, to summarize it, is when you look for a site, you've got to make sure that the site is going to meet the criteria of a data center, and not every site will do that. As a matter of fact, there's a large percentage of sites that typically don't fit it. There's a large percentage of sites that could fit it, but you've got to make a lot of adjustments. It could be cost ineffective. And there are some sites that do fit that criteria. And that's one of the things that Bruce talked about with the Minnesota Tech Corridor, is in the Tech Corridor, there are sites that fit very well to this criteria. And one of the other things I want to talk a little bit about the Tech Corridor and why this site stands out at Centerville is when the bill was passed for the data center incentives, and I happened to be involved in the committee working with the legislature on when that was passed several years ago. I won't get into too much, but there was a first bill that really didn't provide any incentive, and a couple of years later, we were able to get them to revise that to where it had a huge impact. And all of a sudden, you had a bunch of these data center companies that Dan mentioned earlier, from the Flexentials to the Streams to the others, the data banks in the world, that came into the Twin Cities market and started building data centers. Well, the majority of those data centers that were constructed are on the south side of the Twin Cities. It's good, it's great, it's a good area. You know, there's nice data centers down there. But now if you're looking to do a second data center and you're one of those companies or you're a corporation, the Tech Corridor is on the north side of the Twin Cities Metro. You have some distance, you're in different power grids, you're in different even geographic areas from a tornado. It's a significant difference if that's our major risk from a natural disaster. So you can have a redundant site within the same organization at a different part of the Twin Cities Metro and still be close enough that the clients and the customers can be at either of those places if they need to be there. So there's a lot of advantages to what the Minnesota Tech Corridor is talking about and was providing to even current people that are looking to expand in the market. Same with companies. If you start to look at companies, I know some of these, obviously under NDA, I can't disclose where they are, but some of the major companies in the Twin Cities, I mean, if you took probably the top 10 companies in the Twin Cities, 7 or 8 of them are located in the south part. Now they're looking for places in the north part where the Minnesota Tech Corridor comes into play. So those are some of the key things that we found in the study related here. Financial incentives. So I touched a little bit on this. I'm not going to get into all the details. If any of you have questions on all these details and how they're applied and where they are, my contact information is here. Please feel free to reach out. We can talk about it more. But the key difference here is the initial bill that was passed in the legislature required an initial investment of $100 million, okay, and a 100,000 square foot data center. Well, the reality is, if you take the largest companies that use compute power in the Twin Cities or in Minnesota, whether it's a US Bank, a Cargill, a Target, a Best Buy, a United Health Group, none of them need a data center of that size, right? So it was kind of way out there. With that was able to be revised to where it's now down to the 25 million type of investment is what you need for that. And it's down to a reasonable square footage. And it also incorporated upgrades. The first bill did not allow a data center current provider to be able to upgrade and become qualified. What happens is if you meet this initial criteria, you can submit it into the state and you become what's called a qualified data center. And once you are a qualified data center, all of tax incentives and rebates and other things apply. There's generally 2 different categories within of what they apply. There's a category of what applies to the construction of the data center and some of the tax relief and things on the construction of the data center. And then there's an incentive on the ongoing operation of that data center on the tax and incentives that you pay related to continuing to operate it. So what does that mean? Construction is going to mean when you're buying power equipment, generator equipment, cooling equipment, all of these types of things, there are taxes on that equipment. There are rebates available for incentives as a qualified data center to receive that rebates back on that tax that you've paid. And that tax goes to the owner of the facility. Now, if it's a shared facility with host of customers within that facility as a hosting facility, the owner can decide whether they want to pass some of that to the host people or whether they want to keep it for themselves to keep operating costs down. That's really their decision. But the second part, and this is one that we really debated and we really pushed hard for, and generally we were so excited that the people at the legislature understood it and included this, is the purchase of all of the computer technology, hardware and software that goes into the data center also qualifies for tax rebates and incentives. So if you take a typical common company, they're typically going to buy their servers, and every 5 years, they're going to buy new servers. They're going to buy new storage. They're going to buy new network equipment. They're going to buy new software. Well, all of that for the person who is now occupying the data center Whether they own it, lease it or not, doesn't matter. As long as their equipment is going into the data center, they get the tax rebates on all of that compute equipment. And it's for 20 years. It's through July 1st of 2042. So, and even if it's not 2042, let's say you get this data center constructed and operating by July 1st of 2022, which is a little over a year from now, you'll get all 20 years. If you get it in 2023, you still get 19 years of it. And to give you an idea of this, we have clients that Excipio has worked with to run the financials in some of these data centers in Minnesota. They actually are receiving the tax rebates on their computer equipment, their servers, their storage, their software that exceeds what they're paying the data center provider for the data center use, for the facility. So they're literally getting that data center facility for free based on the rebates of what they would have had they built it themselves or had they not been a qualified data center. So it is an extreme benefit within that. The third part is around electricity consumed and where it's at. And people look at Minnesota and say, oh, the cost of power, oh, it's 8 cents a kilowatt. I can get it for 5 cents a kilowatt in Indiana. Okay. And I'm using Indiana as an example. I'm not saying that's where you can get it for that, by the way, just as an example, right? Well, what they're forgetting to look at is that that lower power rate in another state is going to be taxed. So now you have to add the cost of the tax on top of the power. In Minnesota, that electricity is tax exempt. Okay. That is unique to here compared to other places. The second part is what I talked about earlier. This site in Centerville and the sites in Minnesota, almost 5,000 hours of free cooling. Well, think of the power difference to run 5,000 hours of chillers and cooling equipment that you don't have to run here, that you would have to run in even Missouri, Oklahoma, Southern Indiana, all the way down to Texas or the southern states where you can't get the free cooling. Well, when you factor in the cost of the free cooling, you factor in the tax benefits, rebates related to the power consumption, and even at our current consumption rate, your net cost to run the power in that data center in a place like this location at Centerville is lower than what it is even at maybe 5 cents a kilowatt of power in other places. So this whole model that we put together takes into account the financial incentives. It takes into account the unique characteristics of the site. It takes into account all of the rebates for the compute equipment separate from the facility equipment, separate from the power equipment. So if you're looking to construct and pick a site for a data center, you know up front before you go in, does this center make sense? Does this site make sense for a data center for us, right? That's the bottom line. Now, a little bit about the Centerville site. And like I said, if you want to contact Bruce or Mark or myself, all three of us, whichever, we'd be happy to go through the study in great detail for you and show you what's in it and explain it and take the time to answer your questions one-on-one. But this site actually shows an overall reduced cost compared to other sites that we've looked at in Minnesota and in other states. And it actually shows half the cost to run it, which is double the return if you're a data center provider. So if you're a data center provider looking to go into other sites, this site is extremely profitable for you. If you're a corporation looking to get your cost as low as possible, because again, remember, as a company, we want the lowest cost, lowest risk, we can run the data center and still meet our business requirements. This site is running 50% lower cost than a lot of other sites would within the same geographical region of the Twin Cities metro area. So there's some huge benefits to it. And we found that out. And honestly, we had no idea going in. We had some good idea what it would be. We didn't realize it would be this beneficial until we finished going through the study. And I would encourage you, if you have any questions about it, other things, we'll open it up for questions here now. Or if you want to see the study in detail, I'm sure we would be, Bruce or Mark would be happy for us to go through and show you the details of it as well. So I'm going to stop there. Bruce or Mark, are there any other comments you want to add at this point in time?
No, I think you've covered a lot of the information.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks everyone for attending today. And as Jeff mentioned, we'd be more than happy to talk through our site or any other site in the technology corridor and just kind of give you our insights. We've been at this now for about a year now, looking at ways to welcome data centers and high-end data users to our area. And I think we've gained some insights, so we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yep. And the other thing I want to mention too is Brad Burke is actually on vacation today. He was also from Comcast. He was also involved in the study, helped sponsor part of the study as well. And you can always reach out to him as another resource, even though he's not available on the call here today. A little bit for, I know some of you probably know Excipio, maybe some of you do not, but a little bit just to understand what our role was in this. And I can maybe have Bruce and Mark talk a little bit about how we became engaged with them, or if we have any other questions, we can take those as well. But Excipio we do not sell any data center space. We don't sell any products. We don't sell any service. We are truly a third-party objective analysis company. So we go out and do the analysis of a location to identify, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? We do analysis for data centers to help people find a data center provider, to help them find or build a data center, to help them understand how to design and put it together. We're not an engineering firm. You're going to hear from Tom Jackson a little later, who's with an engineering firm, and that's somebody who would go to after we would do our study, as an example. So what we're here to do is really look at it objectively and understand what's there and provide a factual study on what we're really dealing with. And in this case, a site to construct the data center. So Jeff, do we have any questions at this point in time?
I don't see any in the chat room, and there was one question, but Mark did a nice job of answering it in the chat room. So if anybody has any other final comments, Jeff, Bruce, or Mark, feel free to do that now.
Yeah, I would just like to add what Jeff was talking about. We were excited to reach out to Excipio to do an unbiased study on this. And like we mentioned earlier, this is really kind of a one step above a shovel-ready plan that, really positions this site in Centerville really for that. So we were excited. We were more than pleased with the results of the Excipio study. So we were very happy with it, and we're looking forward to moving some dirt someday.
Okay. Mark, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I would echo what Bruce said. Yep.
Okay. Well, Jeff, I know we started a little early. And
Yep.
we
And
left some
that's
time for questions.
yep, that's okay. And if there's any other questions, no, I don't see any questions coming through the chat room. So Jeff, if you want to unshare your screen, so then I can share my screen again here.
There you go. It's all you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you want to, and if Jeff, Bruce, and Mark, if you'd be so kind to mute yourself and to turn off your camera, which would be fantastic. And then I'm going to reshare our screen again. So once again, thanks again, Jeff, Mark, and Bruce for your discussion. Awesome information and stuff. Hey, once again, as a quick reminder, this is our lobby, and if you want to get a hold of Jeff, Mark, or Bruce, just go back to this lobby page, and you can easily click on their LinkedIn profile and go ahead and connect up with them. I know Jeff shared email addresses and phone numbers on the screen as well too. Feel free to do that as well too. So we are running about 10 minutes early, which is totally fine with me. So this is information on our next speaker, Jason Walker. He's with T5 Data Centers. And if you are interested in connecting with Jason, once again, on our lobby, just go ahead and click on his LinkedIn profile and you can do that. So Jason, I am going to turn it over to you and let you take it away. I'm going to turn off my camera and I'm going to mute myself as well too. So Jason, it's all yours. Take it away. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'll just echo what you said. Those first two presentations were very informative. So thanks to everybody who did that. I need to figure out how to share my screen here. Oh, nope. Here we go. So, okay, got that. So again, thanks again. My name is Jason Walker. I'm Senior Vice President at T5 Data Centers, a data center development operations company that's been in the industry since 2010. We're super excited about entering this Minneapolis market. And I think like everybody, I'm sort of tired of Zoom meetings being in the vernacular, but a special thanks to the folks at the Minnesota Real Estate Journal for pulling this off, because I think it's been very, very valuable so far. So let's just dive right into what we're going to talk about today. And give me 1 second, I'll get the screen going. We're going to talk about modernizing a former enterprise data center. And just to give you some background and what we're going to talk about, we're going to go some background on T5 data centers. We're going to talk about, like I said, our new facility in downtown Minneapolis, T5 at Minneapolis. And then we're going to talk about, in a little bit of detail, things that we had to do to modernize this former enterprise data center for a financial institution. So just some background on T5. Like I said, the company was founded in 2010. We like to refer to ourselves as a life cycle services company in the data center industry. So if you take a look at our 3 lines of business, we develop and operate wholesale enterprise and co-location data centers. We also are a buyer of assets in the marketplace right now. Global footprint, expansion into Western Europe, Ireland at the moment. A very strong Fortune 500 customer base, which we'll talk about, and the history of the company, we've really specialized in build-to-suit solutions. So our facility management organization was really born organically out of the company itself. We were building and operating our own data centers, and customers started to ask us if we could actually start to manage their data centers for them. So the facility management team was literally born out of T5 data centers itself. Currently, we've got about 500 critical megawatts managed in North America, 50 plus data centers in 22 markets. We also have a construction services organization, again, similar to our facility management group, was born organically out of the company, doing our own fit outs. We are currently doing a number of different projects for hyperscalers down to enterprise data center companies. We're into solar and renewables, and like I said, we do tenant data hall fit out construction. So as we look across what the global data center portfolio looks like for T5 currently, you'll see a number of markets here that have been discussed already in Dan's presentation. The Minneapolis one here is a strategic partnership with a company called Legacy Investing. We also are working with them in Cleveland and Cincinnati, but a pretty broad US-based portfolio with a number of expansions coming. So we're pretty excited about the data center industry. Now, there was, a few things that were discussed in both presentations. Just that the market is very strong. It's being driven by hyperscalers, and we are starting to see some enterprise customers come into the market for outsourced data center projects, primarily driven around what, as Dan said, hybrid IT strategies. So we talked about some of our customers here. You can see it's a very broad base, Fortune 500, everything from social media to software, it's financials, entertainment. It's a very broad base of customers that we operate data centers and build data centers for. We're no strangers to the Minneapolis market with T5. We've been managing Delta's Minneapolis data center since 2016. And in fact, the folks, when we start talking about T5 at Minneapolis, a number of the folks who are going to be operating that facility come from that Delta operation itself. So I'd like to talk a little bit about T5 at Minneapolis, which is the building that we are operating and managing. Like I said, it's a strategic partnership with Legacy Investments. It's located in what we think is a very convenient downtown location. It's highly secure, centrally located. We've got available underground parking, super secure. Currently have 47,000 square feet of turnkey space available with approximately 4 megawatts of ready turnkey space. We're looking at a phase 2 already that would expand that to 75,000 total square feet and 10.4 megawatts. Very carrier dense. And if you looked at Jeff's presentation when he talked about key attributes of data centers, disaster avoidance, network density, financials, incentive, and power cost, we feel very confident that T5 at Minneapolis really hits all of those right on the mark. So talked again about the current availability of the space, some of the attributes. It's, we'll talk some of the network here. It's fiber dense for sure. Again, the sales tax exemptions and financial incentives for power are super key to the economics of the facility. When you looked at that disaster risk map, I think, being in this downtown location, being on a 4th and 5th floor of the data center, we really have close to eliminated many of the natural disaster risks that could be associated with the site. You know, we've got N+1 concurrent power, which I'll talk about a little bit as we modernize the facility with ample diesel generation backup, fuel storage, you know, approximately 4 days of fuel load in the event that there's a total power outage. So again, this the facility is located on the 4th and 5th floor of the 3rd Avenue building. And this gives you a little bit of an overview of what that 4th floor looks like. There's a significant amount of contiguous data center hall space, which is a nice attribute for the facility. Plenty of power density, and we're looking at customers that are requiring up to 10, even 20 kW per cabinet of power, and we can handle that in the building itself. If we want to do customized data hall fit outs, we can do that. We've already done it for Cogent Communications, which we're announcing today is one of the first large customers in the data center. And like I said, it's a real first-class office building too. So when you think about the outside of the data center space, there's a cafe, there's conference room space, there's storage space. It's a really, really nice building itself too. Again, this just gives you a bit of an overview on the 5th floor itself. Again, similar to the 4th in that there is a significant amount of contiguous space available for customers. And, and like I said, the same options that would be available on the 4th floor. So the history of this building is it was a former financial institution office and data center. And it was designed in approximately 2000. And one of the things that's changed in the last 20 years with data centers is really the designs have gotten significantly more efficient. So in 2000, especially with financial institutions, everything was super robust, super overdone, a lot of 2N from electrical, 2N mechanical, meaning you can lose an entire side and still maintain operations. But over time, especially in the multi-tenant world, the designs have had to become more efficient for the economics. And so what we've really had an opportunity to do is take like I said, a super robust data center and start to carve it out for multi-tenant without losing any of the availability, without doing any damage to the risk profile of the facility itself. And so we're excited about it. So one of the things, like I talked about, was having a robust power and utility setup. So the 3rd Avenue site is fed from 2 substations, distinct and separate. We have an option for a 3rd substation as well. There is ample expansion space as we've sort of redesigned and enhanced the electrical structure of the building to be a multi-tenant facility. So like I talked about, we can take over 10 megs of power and expand this facility that way. And then we've also increased the existing generator capacity with a new block design that, again, from a multi-tenant perspective, adds just another layer of redundancy for the customers in the building. So one of the things we did also is a UPS upgrade. We'll talk a little bit of that when we talk about efficiency. But like I said, it's resilient, 2N, mechanical, and electrical throughout the facility. One of the other things that Jeff mentioned was network dense, and you can see that there is significant fiber access to this building. We've got multiple conduits and vaults to receive power. We just brought on Zayo. I had mentioned Cogent. We've got 7 current providers right now, and so actually that's 8 now with Cogent on. But diverse meet me rooms, which is a necessity for multi-tenant, and cloud on-ramps, which again, for having a multi-tenant presence, is a significant upgrade for the facility itself. And we talked about some of the mechanical upgrades. Again, moving to a multi-tenant facility from a single tenant facility, there had to be some movement of distribution and piping for access to the electrical mechanicals for the data center floor. We talked about the high efficiency UPS systems. That's something that's almost table stakes for an efficient data center now. So, we're seeing 98, 99% efficiency through that UPS. So we're excited about that. And then, again, moving from single tenant to multi-tenant on a facility that, was designed in 2000, it really was a bunch of bunch of little things, control system enhancements. We've got the latest JCI Metasys building management system that again is sort of designed for multi-tenant operations. You know, the mechanical system upgrades, basically just a bunch of monitoring. And, you know, I think Dan mentioned it in his presentation that, you know, having live monitoring and analytics and online provisioning and things like that, they're becoming table stakes for customers. So again, moving from a single tenant to a multi-tenant facility, we had to invest in those. And then talking about operations excellence, which is again table stakes for multi-tenant data centers. You know, 100% uptime. So, you know, T5 in our history, facility management has had a 100% uptime track record. So we're really confident about that process, and we'll go into that a little bit. But again, being a multi-tenant facility, we had to upgrade the CMMS ticketing and troubleshooting. We had a security audit on the building, and then we enhanced the physical security, primarily because it used to be a corporate data center. We needed to add multiple layers of physical security now for that building. So there is, you know, from the building standpoint, there's building security, and we'll talk about the steps that go on before you can even access the data center hall. So this is really where we made some significant changes to the building to accommodate multi-tenant customers, but five security layers from the street to the data hall. We had to upgrade the biometrics and card access. You know, we're very strict with our record retentions for audits. That's super key with multiple customers in a building. And then we updated the loading area with storage and staging to be highly secure as well. You know, another thing that we did have to do is put in a 24/7, 365 security plan, which again is being handled by T5 Facilities Management. So here's kind of an update on what T5 FM is doing for the building itself. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but you know, remote hands is key. We've got you know, vendor management, escorting, and asset management, capacity planning. That stuff is super key for customers in the data center industry. If you look at the management and operations piece, security and compliance is key. Energy audits and incentives, so we've talked about. The security compliance seems to be just more and more important with the customers who are inquiring about the facility. So T5 Facilities Management handles that. And so when we talk about T5 and what we do as a company, we, like I said, full lifecycle data center partner. We've got our operations platform, 50 customers in the US, 600 plus megawatts under management from T5 FM, the proven track record, 100% uptime. And I think that was probably the key for the strategic partnership with Legacy. They needed an operator for the building that had the history. And you know, and we've certainly proven that over the 10 years of the lifetime of T5 Facilities Management. So with that, I would say thank you, and I'll open it up for any questions.
All right, Jason, I do not see any questions in the chat room. So unless you have any other final comments, I think what we could do, I know a few of the people from your next panel are waiting in the lobby right now, or waiting actually they're teed up and kind of ready to go. They just need to turn on their camera and unmute themselves. So Colleen, Tom, I see both of you coming on board, and so if you want to unshare your screen, Jason, I can reshare my screen.
Sure thing.
Well,
I would
just
go ahead. Yeah, just say final comments. We couldn't be more excited about the Minneapolis marketplace. I think Dan touched on a lot of the real positive attributes that the Twin Cities have. And like I said, we're super excited and look forward to working with folks, and hopefully it'll be in person here in short order.
Hey, Jason, I do have a follow-up question for you. What other markets does your firm have projects like this in? Or is this go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say we currently manage 50 plus data centers across North America.
Yep.
And then projects that are specific to our partnership with Legacy are Minneapolis, Cleveland, and Cincinnati.
Gotcha. Fantastic.
Yeah. So, as Dan talked about, it's that next tier of cities where we're starting to see some real growth in the data center market.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Thanks again. And Jason, I know that you're on the next panel, so you can just go ahead and stay right on. Once again, I'm going to reshare my screen. So if you have any questions for Jason, feel free to click on his link here, and also you'll see an ad for his company as well too, and more information about his company down below. So on to our next panel. We have Colleen with the City of Elk River, Tom with the City of Elk River, Jim with Avent Energy, and then also Jason again, and then Ryan with Excel Energy. So let me unshare my screen and let's see how many people are have jumped on for this next segment. I think we have most of you here. I think we might just be missing one person here. So why not, Colleen, why don't you go ahead and take it away and kind of kickstart your panel, and I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. Good morning. I'm Colleen Eddy, the Economic Development Specialist with the City of Elk River. We're happy to be a sponsor of this panel and this summit. Elk River is currently home to 2 data centers. We do have shovel-ready certified through the Minnesota Deed Program. It's a 28-acre site owned by Sherburne County, and that is ready to go as well. So welcome to the Key Data Center Decisions presentations. We have an exciting panel that will focus on the data center industry. We have Tom Segstetter, the Conservation and Key Accounts Manager with Elk River Municipal Utilities, Jim Richardson, the Director of Energy Marketing at Avant Energy and Minnesota Municipal Power Association, Ryan Brewers, the Corporate Economic Development Manager with Excel Energy, and happy to have Jason Walker, Senior Vice President with T5 Data Centers, join us. So let's take a couple minutes and get to know our panel. Tom, do you want to kick us off? Just a quick introduction.
Sure, Tom Segstetter. I'm with Elk River Municipal Utilities, and I work closely with Colleen to promote energy efficiency and conservation to our data center partners, and work with all of our key accounts to make sure that they are saving as much energy and operating their business as efficiently as possible, and also promoting green, sustainable living and business practices through the Energy City Commission and Green Step Cities, 2 organizations which we participate in here in Elk River. Thank you, Colleen.
Welcome. Jim?
Hi, I'm Jim Richardson with Avant Energy. I'm the Director of Energy Marketing, representing the Minnesota Municipal Power Agency. I've been in the municipal energy business for about 37 years, working with municipals actually all across the country. And I'm focused now on trying to bring data center loads to municipal utilities in Minnesota.
Okay. Ryan?
Ryan Brewers, Corporate Economic Development Manager with Excel Energy. And like Jim, kind of our job is to try to bring jobs and capital investment to the communities we serve.
Awesome. And Jason?
Hello again, Jason Walker with T5 Data Centers.
Perfect. So let's dive in. So what is driving the data center industry in the United States and in Minnesota? And how has the impact of 2020 had on the data center industry and the IT landscape as a whole? Jim and Jason, you want to get that started?
That's a very broad question, but I think that the key word is digitalization. It's been going on for a very long time. And if you think back, say like 1993, people were just poking around with the internet. But by 1997, if you didn't have a web presence, you didn't exist. Everything changed in just 4 years. So, and that's continuing, right? So the development of, look at now, the development of connected devices is accelerating. And we used to talk about the Internet of Things just a few years ago, right? Now it's the Internet of everything. So the progress has just been stunning in my view. So, but the largest growth recently has been in the hyperscale facilities. There's a handful of cloud providers that are responsible for basically the bulk of the absorption Co-location growth is still significant, but I think right now hyperscale dominates the numbers. And then of course there's the pandemic, right? It caused a seismic shift in usage. You got remote work, online learning, gaming, streaming. It's been, you've seen steady growth for the last decades, and I certainly think Jason can speak to that. But the pandemic, I think, just accelerated all these changes.
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure. Look at what we're doing right now, having a Zoom conference. So that's a little different. Just so everybody understands what we mean by hyperscalers too, because I'm not sure everybody really understands that term. We're really just referring to the real heavy users of data center capacity, the Googles, the Amazons, Microsofts, the Oracles, and then you've got like ByteDance, like Dan talked about. So, I think Dan really hit the nail on the head on a lot of these demand drivers, but as Jim said, it is hyperscale right now, and it's hyperscale in a big way.
And I think a key to that is that when we're talking about location, and that's what we're really talking about today, is that data centers, they're looking for the most efficient way to deploy capital for their business model. And there's different business models. There's the co-location business model, there's a hyperscale business model, even down to the enterprise business model. They all have different needs. So, certainly new construction dominated the market last year due to the overall growth and capacity. But there are, as Jason was pointing out, have been many deployments of retrofitting structures and building out to the new format.
Yeah, we're going to see too continued investments in high performance compute and AI that are going to drive significant demand as well. And then even with the hyperscalers, you're starting to see them move out to what's being called the edge now. And everybody's got a different definition of the edge. But when you think of a hyperscaler who would take down a 20 or 30 megawatt deployment in Northern Virginia, a small data center edge deployment for them could be 1 to 4 megawatts. And I'm old enough to remember when that was a really, really big data center. It's being looked at as an edge deployment now for the hyperscalers. So it's if you've been following the industry, it's pretty mind-boggling what's going on in the last few years. And I think again, Dan highlighted on this, the pandemic just accelerated a lot of these trends that were already moving forward. Right.
And I think that's key, Jason, that the scale of deployments has increased. And so what does that mean really for cities? The infrastructure requirements get larger and more impactful, especially on the utility system, but depending on how they cool, whether they use water or whether they use more air cooling. These are bigger facilities. And, as was pointed out earlier, a typical manufacturing facility might use a couple of megawatts at most. These things, some of these can be 20, 50 megawatts or more. So consequently, for cities, it takes more time, more planning, budget, just to all those things can impact their location decisions. Because what can you bring me to if you're looking at a site that doesn't have any power or water, and you're looking at a 50, 100, 200 megawatt development, that takes time to build out, right? It takes time to plan, it takes time to coordinate, because it's all interconnected. I know we've got some utility folks, and you've got a lot of experience, obviously, with utilities, Jim. But again, for what used to be a pretty slow moving industry, they're moving pretty quick. And when you say a new substation can come online in 2 years, that's rocket speed for utilities. So right, that's what we're seeing in some of these markets right now. Right. Yeah, I honestly think that there's going to have to be some adjustment in the way the whole utility process, and I've worked for utilities for most of my life, but I think there's going to have to be an adjustment on how utilities process these requests and how the entire process works. Agreed.
And I guess maybe we can throw in Tom and Ryan into that as far as, again, how are utilities adjusting to the hyperscale and what is kind of the impact on the data center industry at this point in time?
Well, to your point, it's speed, right? It's how quick can we respond to them? So, if you say that, hey, we need to, build a new substation, it's going to take 3 years. Well, you don't have a project, right? You're not going to win that project. So it's finding those locations that real estate where you can, tap a line, get the necessary infrastructure there in a timely fashion, and identifying those locations, I think, is key for not only a utility, but the region and the state as a whole to be able to say, hey, here are our sites that meet your needs for this hyperscale data center. And, as I would love to say that they all expand, or they all happen, or all the best sites are in Excel's territory, but you know what? They're not going to come to Minnesota just to see Excel sites. We need everybody to have these sites and good sites available so that our region looks better and attracts those clients to us. So, the more sites we have in Minnesota that could meet the needs, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It has to be in my mind, it has to be a state or region-wide effort to try and identify what makes data center development work in this area. There's got to be investments are going to have to be made to do it, and not every data center is a huge hyperscaler, right? And not every site's going to work for everybody. You're not going to be able to market a 20-acre site to a data center developer who wants 200 acres. And likewise, you're not going to get a whole lot of interest in a 200-acre site from somebody who wants 20 acres or wants to retrofit a building. It has to be a match, right? But getting that communication out there that these sites exist, working with the data center industry to have them understand that Minnesota is a great place to locate their facilities. That's critical for the state, and it's critical for real estate developers.
There was a time when you could put a square peg in a round hole in the data center world, but the market's just too efficient now. It's got to be the right customer for the right site.
Right.
Hey, Colleen, I think one of the things that is important to stress here is partnerships with the community, the ability to have an initial conversation with somebody that's looking for a site, find a site close, and then really focus on the speed to market and how fast you can get them up and operational. One of the things we pride ourselves on is a 90-day window through the planning to construction phase. Having experience with data centers and being able to get them up and running as quickly as possible, and also the flexibility. One of the things for us is having a site that is shovel ready, but also the ability to scale to what the customer is needing. What Jim was saying before, everybody is a little bit different and they have different needs, and you have to be as a utility provider to grow with them. They may not need 50 megawatts year one, but they need 12, and having the ability to ratchet up to serve their growing needs is really important. And that's one of the things we're seeing is just flexibility in helping that customer grow.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Tom. And having that key information ready and available when a developer makes an initial inquiry, that's key, because I've always said unprepared means overlooked. They're simply not going to spend much time when they're looking in an area. If you're not ready, they're gone, right? That's the end of that. So, but if you do have a site that meets those minimums, right, then the key, just as you said, the key is be ready to play catch, right? Be in a position to catch the ball when they need the capacity, be in a position to have the people on your staff that can work with these folks to answer their questions, and be prepared to answer questions they haven't even asked yet, because they do move, as Jason said, they do move very, very quickly, right? They want to move quickly. They're looking at different sites. If you've got the basics, then the other part of it is so important is being able to deliver the services that they want and need, the electric, the rates, working with them on rates, working with them on incentives. Those things are critically important, but it has to be done quickly.
Agreed. And, I think the common theme here is if you can reduce their risk and increase their speed to market, you've got a shot, right?
Right.
And Jim kind of mentioned it a little bit, touched on it, is they're going to ask us a bunch of questions. And, working for a utility, I got a lot of engineers that work with us, right? And our engineers like to know all the inputs before they answer something. we have to get better and get outside our comfort zone a little bit and not necessarily have all those inputs when we make answers, right? So we're gonna have to make assumptions and be okay making assumptions, document them though, so that when you go back to these clients, you can say, here are the assumptions we made, here's your answer. And a lot of times that allows you to engage them in conversations. So they're like, oh, we like this, but we need to change this and this. Now you start to learn more about their process and a little bit about who they are, and it gets you further down that road. So, you know, that's I would say that the same thing applies to cities, right? When we're talking about sewer and water, we have to be okay not knowing all the inputs when we try to respond to their questions. So it is for us, as a lot of it as a technical and engineering aspect, we have to be okay with that, not knowing all those inputs.
That's exactly right, and that's difficult. As a recovering engineer myself, I have to get over that, having to have all the information. But nobody's going to. These are huge projects, right? These are huge, very expensive projects. Nobody's going to have all the answers. You've got to be able to have that understanding that, yes, I want to make this happen, right? What's the next question? How do we help you? You know, having folks on staff that have experience with data centers, you know, especially if there's a data center in the area already, in their city already, great communications between the data center and the utility providers, you know, streamlining all those, having the processes and people in place. All of those things are going to be advantages in the selection process and help bring that project to agreement and over the line.
You know, and the last thing I'll say there is we got to remember a lot of these projects are run by site selectors. Their job is to eliminate us, not keep us in the project funnel. So we have to answer all the questions, because if you don't want to make it further on than the first phase, don't answer all the questions in their RFI. You'll be out.
Right.
And it won't matter how good your site is. Yeah. So check all those boxes, answer all those questions. You know, something as simple as price on a property. We've all been there. We get the RFI, it's due in 3 days. We're pulling together all the data, and the farmer's not sure what they want to sell the land for. We have to put in a value, because I can't, you know, as a customer, you know, if I'm the client, you can't tell me something's for sale if there's not a price to it. So some of those little things, answer all those questions, because I think that's just going to make us stronger as a whole.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The key players at the table all at once. I mean, we've all, you know, most communities have created a RFI type of packet of information, and knowing your community and working closely, I mean, with utilities and the zoning and the planning and the public works in your community plays a huge factor in that. And again, totally agree. You have to have those answers and make quick decisions and be okay with that. So yeah. You know, we kind of touched on the hyperscale. What size of acreage or what size lots are we looking at in this day and age moving forward? As I mean, you kind of touched on, so as a community, are they looking for 20 acres? Are they looking for 200? I know it kind of varies with, you know, basically the hyperscale, the enterprise, colo, those types of things. But are we looking at maybe smaller colos? There were a couple that were proposed, you know, more on the smaller scale, but more of them in different communities. So what size acreage, what can communities, you know, kind of plan for as far as what are data centers, hyperscale, edge, I mean, all those colos, what size acreage are we looking at?
I can start there. I would say I would be looking for anything anywhere between like 5 acres and 500. So anything that falls in that realm, yep. You know, we can look for. It all depends on who you want to attract and what resources you have, right? If I'm a small community of say 2,000 people, I'm probably not going to be able to supply a hyperscaler with the amount of water and wastewater they're going to need, right? So, but maybe I have some other things going for me. So a 20-acre site's probably a good site for me. But if I'm a, you know, a sizable community that has a lot of water and wastewater infrastructure, now I can go after some of those larger hyperscalers. So it really all depends on what you have available. And I would say, don't be afraid of who you are. If you have 20, 30 acres, that's a niche, and that's a need for a lot of, co-location and maybe enterprise data centers. There's nothing wrong with those.
I think Jason can probably speak to this better than I can, but from what I've seen talking with a number of the data center providers across the country, that it really is depending on their business model. What is the market they're looking for? Are they looking for something like, say, pick on Facebook, something where they can locate almost anywhere as long as it's inexpensive land, inexpensive power, that latency is not a big issue for them, but somebody like a bank or somebody who's into financial transactions, latency is key for those folks. So they're looking for they're looking closer to business centers, looking closer to high population centers. So they may be looking for a smaller piece of land to manage that business. It really is dependent on, again, on the business model that they're trying to operate under, which land, which location they're looking for. So I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to it. And we said the trend is most of these are getting bigger. I think a lot of that's because the processing capacity is the requirements are getting larger and larger and larger with the digitalization of the economy. I mean, look at how many devices you have in your house today versus 10 years ago. All that data has to be managed. And then we're looking at, maybe the development of the edge. So even a very small site might be a prime, if it's in the right location, might be a perfect location for a very small edge facility that's needed for specific things. So I think as the data center market grows, matures, develops, evolves, with the products and services that are going to be offered, I think that the size and location parameters are going to shift. So I don't think there is any one formula. I think
there isn't. You look at what T5 has in Minneapolis. We're in the 4th and 5th floor of a downtown building, so it's a little different profile, but it meets the downtown requirement. But when you consider that an acre of land in Ashburn, Virginia, can cost $2 million. You can see the variability across the U.S. So looking at the hyperscaler footprints, it's all over the map. Like I talked about earlier, we're seeing edge deployments from these guys that are in the, like I said, 1 to 4 megawatt range. That, who knows how many acres that would be on if they decide to just develop it and not use co-location. But there's variability all over the U.S. It's pretty dramatic, and I think the two things now are sort of access to eyeballs and connectivity, which are obviously related. So when you look at the big ones, if you look at submarkets like financials, like Jim mentioned, they're still building traditional data centers up here in the Northeast, which are a little bit different profile than what we're seeing with the hyperscalers. So I wish there was a great answer, Colleen, of what the sweet spot looks like, but it's different for just about every geography.
Sure. So every community, yes.
Oh, I was just going to say, my comment would be not necessarily on acreage, but focusing back on availability. I in the past 2 years, with the increased reliance on data, speed to market is probably the biggest one from what I've seen. People are willing to maybe give a little bit on acreage, but it's more availability of power. How fast can you have power there? Is it there today? Can we start construction in 4 months? So I would say speed to market is a big driver, and not necessarily acreage as much in some, depending upon the company, like the other speakers have said.
Right. So communities of all sizes should be, focused on at least putting data center industry in one of their targeted industries, because again, we all, there's a need for this type of industry. So again, looking at community infrastructure, I know we kind of, touch base on this, and I know the last panel kind of did as well, but the certified, shovel-ready certified programs how do they vary? I know, Ryan, you have, you know, at Excel, you have a shovel-ready certified program, and if you can talk a little bit about that. And then I think we could go into like, we are on the community infrastructure, utilities, power, those types of things. How does sustainability and renewable energy play a factor into you know, the data center industry? Is that top of mind for data centers when they're looking at you know, locations and so forth? How does sustainability and renewable energy sources play a factor into that as well?
Sure. First, I can start off by our kind of our shovel ready program. And really, we've called it shovel ready for years, and really it's a document ready program. It's showing you that all the documentation's there. Again, you're trying to reduce risk for a client, increase their speed to market. So somebody can look at a piece of land and say, okay, I know their soil borings have been done and their phase one has been done on it. I've answered probably 90% of the questions they're gonna have on an initial visit with my certified site process. And really the idea here is we have somebody that we pay to review all the data for the sites that we have, and they say, yes, all this data is here, and they put their stamp on it. And whether that's a company like, you know, we use Schneider Consulting. Phil Schneider is a past president of the Site Selectors Guild. You know, he puts his stamp on it, and that buys us credibility when we meet with other site selectors. They know who Phil is, and they're like, yep, we like his work. We know he's got all the data there, so they can trust what's there. Or, you know, maybe we use the state, and the state has an external party that looks at and reviews the data. It's really just kind of somebody's looked at the data and said, okay, all this data is here. You know, our process, we have probably about 130 data points we collect on a site. And we put that all into a binder, and we can give it to a prospect as they come. So I think it's important. I don't think it's as important to say it has to be a certified site done by a utility or done by the state, or you're starting to see regions doing it. But what's important is I'm starting to see this be a differentiator in projects, meaning companies have started to come in and say, we only want certified sites as part of their look. Is that the majority? No, but I'm starting to see that as a trend now, where that's coming up more and more often. So I think the communities that have done that due diligence, have gone ahead and collected all that data, are going to be ahead when it comes to projects in the future. And then real quick on the renewables, sustainability, I think for a hyperscale, if you want a hyperscale data center, you have to be able to provide not only renewable energy, but now they're moving towards 24/7 carbon-free energy. So I think you have to have a plan to get to those pieces. And so, you know, a hyperscale is not going to come if they can't say we have an attributable renewable resource that was added to the system to serve us. Some of the colos, you know, I think the jury's still out on them. We're starting to see more and more need for renewables. It's not as much, you know, they're still mainly a price-driven commodity, but it is getting more and more of an issue for them too as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ryan. I think, you know, with the shovel-ready designation, what it does is it's already a pre-checked set of boxes, right? So it makes it much easier for a site selector to look at a site and say, okay, I've got this piece of paper, whether it's from the state or whoever certified it, you know, Minnesota shovel-ready certified. I know that I've got these things now they're going to be different, right? It's all the information, and they still need to look through those, but at least there's not that delay in having to go do that work up front. They've already got that. So it is a, like you said, I think it's table stakes for sites, unless you have a specific site that's going to check a lot of boxes for other reasons. I think that's something that's got to be done. And you're also right on sustainability. I think, you know, talking with a lot of these folks, you know, sustainability, it's not just, it's top of mind for a lot of corporations, not just the data center industry. So a lot of folks. So Yeah, obviously for the hyperscalers, yes, they absolutely want this. How they go about it, every one of them is different on what they're trying to do. I mean, for example, Switch spent $30 million to exit NV Energy's system so that they could meet their sustainability goals, right? They just wanted to leave the utility system because they couldn't get what they wanted within the NV Energy system. So you have that on one end, and then you have, like you said, some of the co-location providers, they want it, but it's not that big of a deal for them right now, right? It hasn't been. But what I'm hearing from these folks is that it's becoming a big deal for their customers. So they're having to do that. They're having to do it and change the economics of the operation so they can accommodate these customers. Some folks won't locate in a co-location facility if it's not certified X% green energy, or they can't buy the credits. So you're seeing that, and you see like what Google's doing, which they want to be able to say, not just I have these RECs, I want to be using 100% renewable energy throughout my operation. And going to the entire renewable cycle, the three-step process, three-stage process to reduce their footprints. So I think your answer is correct. It's kind of all over the map. Depends on who you're trying to attract.
True, but it goes downstream from the bigger guys. You referenced Google. I think their target date is 2035
Right.
For that, Jim. And so when they put a flag in the ground, it runs downstream pretty fast.
That's
I think
right.
if you look at kind of two themes that I always like to bring up, it's size and scale go from the U.S. over to Europe, and regulations go from Europe to the U.S. So if you want to look at what the U.S. is going to look like in the data center world in 2 years, I would just take a peek over what's going on in Europe right now.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think the other part of it too is, what are the customers looking for, right? And it's like you said, what's going on in Europe is more regulatory driven. In the U.S., I think it's more customer driven. What are they trying to achieve? And where that causes problems, in my mind, is you've got folks who want to be, say, 100% renewables on the data center side. How does a utility carve out a renewable power source for a single customer? That's difficult because their customers, the utility itself wants to be 100% renewable, or whatever goals they've set over a period of time. They want to provide renewable energy for their entire system and become renewable. It's difficult there are issues with trying to create a renewable power arrangement for one customer versus the rest of the customers. How do you make the investment fair, right? So that's a debate that's been going on for a while.
No doubt.
And in Elk River, we do have a clean energy choice program. And Tom, how many participants are on that program or in that program?
Yeah, currently we're looking at close to 400 residential and commercial customers that choose. That's one of the nice things that we offer for residential and commercial customers, is the option to take on as much renewable energy as they would like, and they have the ability to pay a little bit more to offset some of those additional costs for procuring that renewable energy specifically for them. And moving, I think Jim and Ryan did a great job about talking about renewable energy. I think the big thing is, flexibility in how to meet the customer's need. And that's one of the things that we're able to do. But going beyond the actual power is the focus of the community. One of the things that we've been seeing more of is, what other speakers have talked about is it's part of their fiber, it's part of their corporate being, it's what their customers want. So they're looking for communities that are, and not just power, they're looking for the community that is focused on efficiency, renewable, sustainability. It's part of their corporate vision or mission that they want to participate in those type of initiatives to show their customers that they truly are committed to decreasing the impact of their business activity on the world around them. So we're seeing some tire kickers that are very interested in not only the Clean Energy Choice Program, but also Green Step Cities and the Energy City Commission, which really focus on sustainable living and business practices.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Tom. A lot of these folks are very interested in their environmental image, right? What are they doing? How can they partner with the community and to make these things happen? So.
And these corporations are big pieces of the community, whether it be a fringe at 4 or 5 megawatts to a hyperscale. They definitely impact the community they join, and they become part of that community. And it's really nice that they are committed to those environmental initiatives that are supported by the community.
Yeah, that brings up a point from the last question that I wanted to mention. I forgot it, was that you mentioned smaller communities, data centers in smaller communities. It's what those tend to do is data centers, when a data center locates, it tends to draw more business to that community because as we were talking about before, with the digitalization, every business has to have a web presence. Every business is managing more and more data, regardless of the business type. So having a local data center in your community makes it more attractive for other businesses to locate in that community too, because they can get that processing that they need right there. I think that's very important for community development, is understanding the value of bringing a data center to other businesses, to business growth in general.
Well, again, we have 2 data centers, and the utilities and the water capacity was increased to bring these 2 data centers into our community. And so again, the community as a whole benefited from that overbuilding per se, back 10 years. So again, it's a benefit to the community in that sense and in that capacity as well. So yeah. So
I mean, data centers are great for communities. They run very efficiently. They're great for utilities. They have a great load factor. They bring great jobs to the community. They don't bring a tremendous amount of traffic and hauling. So they have a relatively small impact on the community, but they have big demands for energy and water, and they are efficient users of those resources.
Right. What's the most frequently asked question when interested parties approach you about a data center site? Access to reliable power, water requirements, those types of things. So what's the frequently asked question about, that data centers are questioning about different sites?
I would say it's timing, right? I mean, they kind of know when they need the site. It's, can you meet their timing requirements?
And what?
And so,
sorry. And what is the timing that we're looking at when you say that? I mean,
well, it could be different for each data center, right? Sometimes there might be an immediate need where they want to break ground in 12 months,
wow.
right? And so if that's the case, then you probably have to have all those check boxes for utilities ready to go within, probably, if they're breaking ground in 12 months, you probably have to be ready to go in that 18 to 24 months of having everything there and ready to go. But then there's others that are like, oh, we're looking for future growth. So we might be 3 years out before we break ground. So different set of problems to solve. But I think primarily it's always a timing question of, how quick can we do this? Because if we can shave off from our site, let's say they want to be up and running in 18 months, and you can shave 2 months off, that's a huge benefit to that client to get them started and up and running 2 months earlier.
Right. These folks are getting so good at managing the construction process and the materials, the workflow, the supply chain, right? They've got that down to where they can stand these things up and get them operational in less than a year. Once they've broken ground, be up and running. So it creates a much quicker than what most cities are used to. It creates a much quicker timeline, having that. So it's a different way of thinking about that planning. A lot of what I see is folks are at the first thing you're asking is, how big is your site? How much power can you get me? What kind of water supply do you have? Those three things come up first. Everything else is, kind of secondary. It's those three things that come up first.
Well, let's not discount cost per kW here too.
Well, but yeah. It's interesting when I look at, like, for example, Northern Virginia versus Northern California. About 60% of all the hyperscale growth was in Northern Virginia last year, about 500 megawatts, and then you look at and a couple hundred in Northern California. Power rates in Northern California are twice that in Virginia. So there's still folks are willing to buy and look at the developments in New York. I think 20-30 megawatts went into New York and New Jersey. They have much higher electric rates than obviously Minnesota, but then some of the other areas where folks are locating, and it's still the business need that's driving that location.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the power. But everybody who is power cost sensitive, the first, like you said, Jason, one of the first things that they'll ask is, what's your power rate, right? And I was talking to a site selector the other day, and one of the first questions, well, what's your power rate, right? How much land do you have? When can it be ready? What's the infrastructure look like? And what's the electric rate?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be geographies where people just have to be, power cost, independent of that decision, but it's still one that comes up frequently.
And it's also the rate structure too. It's not just the flat rate, depending on, some utilities, like MMPAs come up with some very innovative rate structures that will help some, these kinds of users a lot. I can't quantify that right now, but it will make a big difference in allowing these folks to access, market-based power, right? It also we can also help them with sustainability goals. It depends. Interesting conversation. I talked with a couple of hyperscalers about their sustainability goals, and they said, well, we want to buy the RECs, we want to buy the wind power, solar power, renewables, and one of the RECs. And I said, well, what if, hypothetically, if I had a utility that was 100% renewable, because eventually we're all going to get there, right? Maybe it's 2030, maybe it's 2045, whenever. Maybe it's much sooner than that, depending on who you are. But once we're there, do you still need to buy RECs? And I said, if I can supply you 100% renewable power off my system today, would you still want to buy RECs? And he looked, and his answer was, I've never been asked that question before. I don't know how to answer that. So that's but that's coming, right? Once utilities get to be, 50, 60, 70% renewable, at what point to the data centers who want the green power, at what point do they still need RECs? Or what point can they just take it off the system? It's an interesting question that I don't think anybody's really addressed yet.
Right. On a bigger scale, I know we've discussed a lot about the communities on the community size of, but how about as a state? And maybe this is a question for you, Jason, as far as, us as a state, how do we, or where do we compare with other states, and what can we be doing to increase the data center industry here in the state of Minnesota? I guess, how do we compare with the other, states? And again, there's a lot that goes into that as far as the rates and things like that, and the power usage. But again, kind of scale it down, I guess, we as a state, and how can more.
I think Dan hit on some of those earlier, but you look at the attributes of just the Twin Cities and greater, Minneapolis area. It's population dense. There's a significant number of large companies. I think it was 20 plus Fortune 500 companies are headquartered in the area. So that drives an IT ecosystem just in and of itself. So I think the attributes for Minneapolis is what we would call a second tier data center market are pretty positive. Again, with the checking the boxes of disaster avoidance and network and financial incentives and what have you, it checks a lot of boxes that the area does. And I think that's why you're going to continue to see growth. I mean, again, back to Dan's presentation about capacity coming online, there's, a couple of other providers and then T5 bringing, 4 megawatts online of capacity. And we're clearly bullish on the metro area.
Great.
And, to Jason's point, I think if you look historically at Minnesota, right, we're never bleeding edge on anything, right? We're pretty conservative. We've got the 3Ms here that have been here forever. And I think historically, they've all had their own data centers and ran them. And I think we've lagged behind on that adoption of the co-location market, just because, again, we're just a little risk adverse, if you will. And I think you're starting to see that catch up in our growth now. And I think it'll continue to run that gambit as more and more adopt that kind of co-location market and see that it's okay, right? We're like, okay, this is, maybe running a data center is not my core competency if I'm 3M. And I'm much better off sending that off to a co-location provider that can, meet more of my needs, and I can just worry about, developing the products that I develop.
Right.
Compelling value proposition for sure. And I wouldn't necessarily, single out Minneapolis or Minnesota for that. There's a number of areas around the US where companies are slower moving, but
Yep.
The cloud train's here and it's secure and it's moving forward. So it's an inevitability for these companies to adopt at least some sort of hybrid cloud strategy. And many of them they're in process. We're talking to several old line companies in Minneapolis right now, and they're all taking a hard look at it.
All right. Well, great. Any other, I guess, if you had a crystal ball, what do you kind of foresee happening in the data center industry in the next 5-10 years out?
Boy, if I could predict that, I would be I'd be independently wealthy, I think. But I think Minnesota is just poised for more and more growth. I really do. Being in the economic development realm, we all get kind of those RFIs that come out, and those aren't slowing down. So I think once we get things to kind of pop, I think we're at the beginning of popping popcorn, right? We're gonna get really busy here in the next few years, and I think it's good for all of us. I think the key point though is to try to be as ready for that as much as we can, and do as much work up front as you can. And I've always told communities that just because you don't have the utilities at your site, that doesn't mean that you get discounted. Because if let's take water for example, I can have a garden hose that serves a site and I say water's there and check a box. But if you can get the needed infrastructure within a construction cycle, I think that's also as good. So
Right.
Understand where can you get to, can you get this much water in, can you get 1 million gallons of water a day to a site? And then could you take that wastewater out? What's your time schedule to get that? And have those defined so that when somebody comes and asks that question, you're ready for it. And that'll play well to the client and the site selector, because they're like, hey, this community wants us. They're ready. They've got their ducks in a row. And I think it's only going to benefit us all.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think the key to it is the communities have to stay engaged. The real estate folks have to stay engaged all the time with the data center market, what's going on in the data center market, because it's changing so quickly. Like you mentioned with the water requirements, that's going to become a big thing. It's already a big thing in some areas. A lot of developers are changing their designs to minimize water requirements so that they're not so huge, because it is such a problem in some areas. So I can see, potentially a movement away from these high water use. So it's maybe not going to be that big of a problem. Same thing with power use, and same thing with the sustainability. I see power use only going up. Everybody's making more and more efficient servers. right? But if you make the servers twice as efficient, but you put 4 more of them in there, you still increased your power use. And that's kind of the trend that's been going on, is bigger and bigger and bigger because of the digitalization. So staying current, having active conversations with the folks in the data center industry, I think that's key to making sure that your sites are meeting or ticking as many boxes as you can, right? Because those boxes are going to shift.
If I could jump in here quickly, just on that water question, I heard Tom say it as well, that data centers are large water users, and I'm aware of the cooling efforts and those type of things, but I've been hearing a lot of people tell me that's an albatross at this point, and nobody is really building new facilities that pump and dump. So, for a lack of a better term, are you guys seeing that across the industry? Is that the exception now rather than a rule, or are people still building facilities that use potable water just to cool it once and then it's in the sewer? I just can't see that as a sustainable solution going forward. I think, Minnesota, we're poised to build that physically. As an engineer, I could design that for you. We have the water's in the ground. It just doesn't, the political and social will to do that is just waning quickly, I would think.
Agreed. Certainly at scale.
Yeah, I mean,
Air cooled is the move.
yep.
Yeah.
And I think I think there's going to be a reduction in water, but I still remember that they use a ton of water. I mean, that's really the dirty little secret in the data center world, is that they've kind of solved this problem of using renewable energy, because they use a lot of it, but it's going to be all renewable, but they still use a lot of water. So I think, to your point, we are going to see a reduction, but I still think they're going to be a large water user when you look at customers that you would have in a city anyways. I still think they'll be they'll be a top 5 water user. Yeah,
I think it depends on the design of the facility and what they've been used to doing. Some of the hyperscalers consider their water use a trade secret, because so good luck trying to find it what it is. But yeah, it is still an issue for some of them. But some developers have changed, their design is different, so they don't use nearly as much water. They don't use the same technology to do it, processes.
Are those developers, are those folks that you say it's a trade secret, but they get a bill from the city for their water, correct? How does that, I mean, are they really paying market rate for water from a city utility?
Well, from what I've seen, you have to dig to find the contracts, right? You can find the contracts if you dig enough, or at least you can't find the rates, but you can find out some information if you dig enough. But yeah, there is some of these folks use a tremendous amount of water depending on their design, and there are huge loads, right? They're huge cooling loads, and some of them don't, right? It just depends on their design.
It's a good segue to my 5-year crystal ball, Colleen, which point 1 was going to be a hyper focus on sustainability across the entire industry, not just specific to Minneapolis. But I also think Minneapolis, to Ryan's point, is certainly poised for growth in the Minnesota state of Minnesota as well. I look at demand as kind of like an accordion type of demand, and it absorption hits, and then it goes slow for a while. New capacity comes online, and then absorption hits. I think we're at that inflection point where we're bringing capacity on. You're starting to see enterprise customers in the area go to more cloud hybrid IT, and so I honestly think we're going to see a very robust data center market here over the next 24, 36 months with those trends. And I do think there's going to be hyperscale deployments in this area too. There's just too many eyeballs and too many customers for, whichever cloud provider wins the deal, that they're going to have a presence.
Yeah.
Great. Tom and Jim, crystal ball.
I think that was exactly on point. I think it was exactly on point. I think that's it's a matter of being ready to catch those requests when they come in, right? Play catch.
I think there's from what I can see, there's definitely a lot of interest in Minnesota. A lot of RFIs, a lot of people are out there kicking the tires. So I think Ryan maybe mentioned that things are going to be like popcorn here, and I would imagine we'll start seeing things hopefully 2021, if not 2021, 2022.
Agreed.
Perfect. Any other questions? I think we'll start wrapping it up. If all of you want to just participate in a quick closing wrap up, I will share my screen and share our contact information. I think, maybe not. I think Jeff would have to give me control. That's kind of scary.
I know it is. It's very scary to do that, but hang on. I thought you had yeah, you should be able to share your screen. You want to try it again?
Maybe I'll.
Otherwise, if it doesn't work for you, I'll pull something up to share with everybody.
Oh, here. I got it. There's our contact information. So wrapping up, Jason, you're first on my screen. Closing remarks.
I think I probably touched on them just given my 5-year crystal ball, but
I like that.
my earlier presentation, T5 is super excited about being in Minneapolis. We love the area. We're bullish on the marketplace, and I think it's going to be an exciting relationship with us in the state of Minnesota.
Wonderful. Thank you. Tom?
I guess my closing remarks would be build relationships. With relationships comes that commitment to a community, and think of these people that are site selectors as partners, and you want to find a good fit. Not every data center person is going to find the exact site in any one location, but if you look at the region, just work together and find a site that fits their needs, and reach out to the utilities and the communities to get the experts for that particular place, city on board and working with the client.
Great. Jim?
I think I'd say we live in interesting times, and the digitalization movement is only going to accelerate, and I think it's going to require a better understanding between the data center providers and cities, utilities to make those projects happen. The more understanding, the more knowledge that can be shared between the two, I think that just makes more room for opportunities, right? And it creates some efficiencies that these folks are looking for.
Great. And Ryan?
I'll build a little bit on Tom said about build those relationships. Build those relationships both internally and externally, meaning internally to your region, right? Leverage your regional partners, whether it's utilities, if you're a city, leverage your utilities, leverage your regional EDO partners like the greater MSPs or even the deeds. Work with those people because, you want to win a project, you have a good team, right? We can't do this all as one, we do it together. So I'm a firm believer that a rising tide lifts all boats, right? I want my competitors in Minnesota to be strong because if they're not, I'm weaker. If they're strong, I'm stronger. So I think we're all in it together, build those relationships and work them and don't be afraid to ask for help. Again, from utilities, whoever, we're all in this together and we want Minnesota to succeed.
We do. And at a community level, again, if Elk River doesn't win a project, at least if Minnesota does, it is a win-win for all of us. So totally agree with everything that you and all of you have mentioned. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Reach out to any of our panelists with any questions you may have. And I appreciate this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen, Ryan, Jim, Tom, and Jason. So if all of you would be so kind to mute yourself and turn off your camera. And then Colleen, thanks for stopping to share your screen. I am gonna reshare my screen one final time here. Just as a reminder, if you wanna connect up with any of those folks on the panel, please go back to our lobby and you can easily click on their LinkedIn profiles and connect with them, or Colleen had put phone numbers and email addresses on there as well too. Also, before I do kick off the last panel, one last final time, I would like to thank our gracious sponsors for participating in today's program. T5, Connexus Energy, AFCOM, Excel Energy, City of Elk River, and Great River Energy. So thank you so much to our sponsors for being involved with today's event. This is going to be the last you're going to hear from me, and I'm going to have Tom Jackson and Keith end our program for us. So I know they're both on. So Tom and Keith, if you want to turn on your cameras and microphones, we can get the program going. So Keith, are you able to get on? And Tom?
Yeah,
There you are. There you are, Keith. Oh, hey, you guys are together. So I am gonna turn my camera off and mute myself and get out of your way and let you take us the rest of the way. Gentlemen, it's all yours. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks for letting us go last this time. We're usually at the 8 a.m. when everybody's still sleeping, but now I think you've given people time to get sleepy, and we'll see what happens here. So yeah, like I said, Jeff had kind of introduced us here. I think you just got to hit the full screen there. It's showing just fine. Tom Jackson, Dunham Mechanical Engineer, and Keith with Itasca Point, running the technology here for us. So,
all right, I think we're running. So, Colleen, I think you kind of teed it up great for us, which was let's talk a little bit about the future of data centers, and that really is what we're going to wrap up today with. And the overall idea here is to talk a little bit about this. As Tom and I were talking about prepping for this meeting, we said, hey, how were we going to discuss this? And we took a case study approach to this and talk about it in some real world kind of examples, and thought we'd jump together since we were practicing together and make it easy for everyone to see here today.
You want to share the other? I think, are we showing the presentation mode here? Or?
You guys need to switch your other monitor.
Okay. We don't want to share all the secrets and give away everything too early here. So I think one of the things that I want to say is since we are last, and since everybody's probably doing other work at this time, I want to make sure everybody starts using the chat a lot more. Hopefully we get some good questions through there. Hopefully there's a couple of snarky comments that we can see. And hopefully we can figure this out and get it working through. So please send things through, whether they're questions now, questions later. Thank you again to all the presentations before us. Great information. Hopefully you didn't steal too much of our thunder. Yeah, that works now. So, but yeah, great presentations, and we'll try to keep going here.
Yeah, and really what we're going to do is we've got kind of 4 case studies we highlighted, really what changed. And I think this was introduced earlier in some of the presentations, but we'll get into that a little bit further from our perspective. We'll talk a little bit about cost modeling and some of the attributes. I know there was some discussions around what to do from a city view on that. We'll talk about future operators. And again, I think there was some definite touches on that, as well as kind of the future data center and cloud environments from our perspective. Tom?
Great. So who moved my data center, right? What changed, right? What did 2020 do to us? Is it different? Where did it go? How does it look different for all of us? As a corporate standpoint and from a data center side. So I think obviously the big things is COVID created this crazy work environment, right? So data centers unfortunately couldn't just send everybody home, right? There's got to be hands and feet in the data center working. So what happened there? How did they change their personality, their personnel teams, switching people around, keeping people together, making more barriers, right? We've always tried to keep people out of the data center, but now we definitely need to keep people out of the data center. So what happens if one person on that night shift gets COVID and the whole team gets wiped out? Now you can't operate your data center, right? So there was a lot of policy changes there. There was a lot of information sharing and a lot of switching back and forth. I think there was a lot of, hands and feet that couldn't come in anymore, right? Or they had to schedule it more. Or, you know, some of these companies that were a little more lax about, sure, just go ahead and rack and stack whenever you want. Now it was a more scheduled, keep people away, lots of hand sanitizer and everything else. So I think there was a lot of those changes, which maybe shifted some of the, what does it look like from the process side, right? From the dock, when you're unloading your truck all the way through, what am I touching? What am I not touching? How am I keeping away from people? What, you know, what do those man traps look like now? So there was a lot of things that kind of changed the internal. I think some of the other big things, obviously, is the remote work, right? When we were talking in 2019, early 2020, a lot of people trended towards, hey, I want to work from home, right? We're talking about the millennial generation wanting to stay at home, wanting to work different hours. And a lot of people, you know, if you weren't running around the country being remote, you were stuck at your desk because that's where you had to be, right? There was no way anybody can work remote. There's no way any company can just send everybody home and it'll work just fine, right? So there was that trend of what does this really look like? So there was some people that were kind of dabbling in it. We'll kind of go through that. Yeah. So one of these great examples here, right, that Keith had brought through here, typical stock exchange example of a customer using traders, right? So they have to be on site, right? So these business operators are stuck in the office, they're doing their work. It's really latency specific, so there can't be any lag at all. So I got to use all those on-site servers, right? There's no way anybody can work outside the office because it's got to be right here in that big pipeline that goes right from that on-site server right to the data center back. Everything must work right. Right. Well, then you had to send everybody home. So that wasn't an option anymore. And then we started seeing people going, oh, okay, well, I'm sitting at home and I'm just going to the data center by myself. Why is that different? Right. I don't need to be right on site. Right. So it's the latency discussion. It's the apps discussion of maybe those apps don't need to be right on that server. Right. Maybe we can push them to the data center like we've always tried to do. And keep them in a more secure environment. If you keep a bunch of stuff on site in your office building, now it's got to have redundant power, redundant cooling, all sorts of security. You got your regular office IT guy going in and out of there and propping the door open. You don't really have your security anymore, right? So it was in this example, it's the latency question of, is it going to be as fast? And I think you saw it was, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, what we were trying to do is convince this customer to get those servers out of that Boston site, right? And you know, again, over years of trying to convince them, and they continued to have the stop light up. No, you can't do that. It's not going to work the same. Pretty quickly, they realized that they were going to have to work from home. Now they had some traders in the office, but many of them were going through this path, and it became a change. All of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, we can absolutely move those servers out of there. So they're moving their office in Boston. And as a portion of that, now they're definitely not going to have servers in their new office. They're going to connect to that, you know, in that case, a couple pairs of colos that they will be connecting to, which then connect them to the cloud.
And that helps with the number of boxes you got to buy too, right? As opposed to buying boxes here and software and licensing, just keep it where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think they talked about that a little earlier, which is that hybrid view of how this is all going to work and the acceptance, right? They are accepting there was a lot of change had to happen with things. And it was a force the hand perspective.
Even though you've been trying to force the hand for a while.
Precisely.
For these reasons. So VDI, you know, there was a lot more use of those virtual desktops. So what did that do, right? We talk about that customer there, and we'll go into another one here where we got to have all this high bandwidth right from those people right to that server. There's no way it can be virtual because now it's going to be slow, it's going to be latent, right? So you talk about the hose versus the fire hose. You know, you need that high bandwidth. If you have 100 people sitting in this office going right to those equipment, well, what happens if we just send them all virtual? Can everybody log in from anywhere like they were doing, right? Does that reduce our latency need? Now I'm just worried about Bob sitting at home with his internet not crashing. So can we move people off-site like we looked at before? So here's another example from a civil engineering company, similar too, right? Where you have everybody sitting in the office and maybe 20% of these people say there's no way we can use virtual desktop, right? I need this box. I got to run my CAD software. I got to run my GIS software here in this example. It's got to be fast. It's got to be right here. I got to be right next to it just because this is the box. There's no way I'm ever changing. It's never going to go away. Well, then when you force people to work from home, guess what? It worked just fine. Let's move all of those critical softwares out to a VDI, keep it out of this room. You don't have to sit right next to this box anymore. Now that latency issue kind of goes away, right? You're the remote user going to the VDI and the VDI is doing the compute, right? So as long as that virtual desktop is as close as you need it for latency issues, it's no different than sitting in the office with you. It's now out here. So really that latency, all you're doing from home into that virtual desktop is mouse clicks and video screens and a couple of keyboard strokes. So the thought is this group was trying to get everybody to that co-location, right? And there was these people saying, no way, we're never going out to colo. I have to be right next to this box. And COVID proved that you could do it, right, with a few changes.
Yeah, and I think this was, a lot of the speakers were talking a little bit about that change and the movement of what was happening. And absolutely, I think the acceptance, it progressed that a long way. So I think there was definitely a change in behavior. And pretty quickly, they had to resolve those issues for those 20% of users.
So, and I think that talks about, the spin ups too, right? Is having people that know about virtual, having people that know the options and the ideas. How can this happen? Well, if you've never done virtual desktop, you got to have a good partner that knows how to do it. If you've never spun this up or spun that up, you could be doing it wrong and this person, that person. And now, I'm sure there's countless number of companies that were out for a few weeks or a few months of everybody sitting at home going, how do I log in? What am I doing? So having it in place and being able to get it there quick.
Absolutely.
And then cloud, right? So cloud's been growing. We all know cloud is the thing and the new way to go, right? So everybody was kind of getting there quick. Now with everybody being at home and now you got to get there quicker, we got to figure out easier ways to move it up and down. So you talk about public cloud versus private cloud, public being a lot of these hyperscales that we've been talking about throughout the whole day, going on to the Googles and the Microsoft and the AWS versus those private cloud options, right? Can I, as an enterprise, build my own cloud so my employees can come in and out instead of paying the rates to go out to the public cloud? I think a lot of the things that we've been talking about too has been using the cloud as a tool, right? Before it was, we're never going to go to the cloud because I don't know what it is and I don't know how expensive it is. Well, now it's getting to the point where it's a business decision, right? I'm going to pay for what I need. I'm going to send some apps out there to the cloud, do their work for a month or two because that's my heavy time, and I'm going to bring them back. Or I'm going to spin this up and spin that up here and there. So I think some of these other future things that are coming is more of that automation. How fast can I get to the cloud? How fast can I spin up a data center somewhere else? So, and you're seeing that quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I think Dan touched on it, kind of that hybrid IT, how does that all work? And I think Jason even mentioned the cloud train is here. All of our customers, it's not a matter, and it used to be, hey, do I renovate my data center or do I build a new data center? Or then it was, do I renovate my data center? Do I expand my data center? Do I go to colo? And now it's pretty much, I want to either get out of the data center business and go to a colo, or I want to at least have some flavors of cloud and different elements of cloud running. Touching a little bit on private and public, I think we talked a lot about the hyperscale again in that public space. Private, again, we're seeing more and more providers change their business models from a colo basis to have some ability to spin up environments within those colo environments. And those are maybe for the people that aren't quite ready for the cloud, public cloud that is. And so that definitely is a market. Again, I think people are evolving in that cloud space related to, I should say, in the provider co-location space. They're continuing to add more services. So, and then just on the pay for use, I think that is one of those things where it really started in the user basis and then transitioned to people getting used to spending or paying for what I consume and what I consume only. All right, then we're going to jump over to just some cost modeling components. Here again, I think similarly, in that colo space and in the real estate space, really, there's been a lot of discussions around how much something costs per square foot, how much kWh may cost. Again, getting back to the energy conversations we had earlier. But as data center operator and real estate folks, I think we really need to understand and drive that all the way through. And we're seeing clients now getting down to what is my per cabinet cost? What is my per device cost? And that takes and down to the application or service. And again, that's that pay per use. And especially as I start to compare and contrast it to cloud, they need to have a sense of what am I consuming and how much is that cost. So again, I think our perspective of this is making sure you understand all of your costs as a data center and then feeding that information up. And that's why they're making some of the decisions and why some of this may be coming here.
And that's not just cloud, right? That's not just, I need to know how much kW per cabinet if I'm going to colo. That's internally too, right? If you had your own enterprise, you're reporting all these costs to somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think as we're seeing people mature, definitely a space, the one game in this is this complex, right? And it's always changing, and the data center environments, what they're doing and operating are always changing. Some of that is, we do see some folks focusing on the magnitude of all of the information, and that can simply be overwhelming end to end looking at those. So other things that we see is, it's sometimes whose bucket is this item in, right? Is it an energy cost and maybe in the facilities? Might be server and asset cost in the IT space. So again, bringing, and I think there was some talk about partnering, and we see partnering with facilities and IT across the board, making sure that everybody's at the table. Some commonly overlooked items, and it was talked about a little bit, is you talked about the carrier services coming in and to those co-location sites. But we see resources, security, and compliance as some things that really end up differentiating some of the co-locations where they're providing some of that compliance for one site or maybe 27 or 30 sites. So they're able to do that a lot more efficiently than maybe a enterprise client can do that. And then the move toward intelligent data center, I think that was discussed a little bit. Dan kind of brought that up as table stakes, where having an intelligent data center, understanding what's going on, and being able to ship out equipment and have it show up and have somebody install it without going. We manage a number of data centers where we're doing that, where we're shipping it to East Coast and West Coast, and we have to have scripts and so forth to make sure that those people understand it and then have real-time visibility.
And I think that's one of those things too, is understanding, yes, the colo says that they have monitoring and don't worry about it, right? But do you, as the owner, as you're sending stuff out, do you know it went where it was supposed to go? Do you know what the power it's consuming, or are you just assuming that they're going to get it there, right? So it's having that monitoring on your side too, or it's at least, working with the colo or working wherever you go, and getting that information back and trusting those resources and knowing what your equipment's doing, right? Because there's several IT owners on site here or on this call right now that have known the game of always changing what's coming in, what's coming out, and nobody knows how much this rack is consuming anymore because that guy threw a bunch of stuff in there and nobody knows where it's going. So that's that facilities and IT talking, right? We've talked about it for years and years and years, but it's more and more critical. And now you're going to get that, hey, if I have some great monitoring in there, I know that this cabinet that used to be running at 10 kW rack is running at 1 kW for this whole rack. So obviously there's a bunch of zombie servers in there, get them out of here so we can use that space. And that's only coming with that monitoring. So you can see those costs that you're really getting per cabinet, per device, per application.
Yeah, from a cost modeling standpoint, we just wanted to highlight one example of this. And, I think Dan introduced it as the interconnected sites. And really, this is one thing that the cloud brings and changes. And I want to touch on that a little bit. I have other presentations that I've given that talk about what is the cloud, and again, what is the cloud? What's in Azure? What's in AWS? What's in Google? It's servers, storage, network, with some automation over the top of it, right? So that's where that stuff is. And presently, when we're talking to customers, in Minnesota specifically and around this region. Right now, if I'm going to cloud, I'm likely going to Chicago, I'm likely going to Iowa, or I'm likely going to East Coast or West Coast. And that's where those servers are today. So that makes that more of a latent or a poorer performance from a user standpoint, and that's not going to be a good thing. The good news, I think, was talked quite a bit about today, is that a lot of the tier 1 cities have been, those checks are done, and now people are expanding adjacent to them. But there's a lot of view and look at these tier 2 cities. So again, they talked about how many eyeballs, how many users, where are the users? And we in Minnesota expect a good experience, just like they do in the East Coast to West Coast or Chicago. So again, there is just business demand. I think that's going to fuel this, the popcorn making, as it was discussed earlier. But in this example, we were brought in and a customer was looking at the cost of one of their, they had 2 sites that were costing them approximately $12,000 per cabinet. And they really didn't understand why, when maybe a cabinet in a traditional colo might average, $1,200 to $1,500 per cabinet, why am I paying $12,000 for these particular cabinets? And what we illustrated here, just as a simple version of, they have 2 enterprise data centers, and again, redundancy between those, there's a whole bunch of carrier links and everything else, but this is a simplified version of it. But coming through those cloud hubs, now I could jump on, in this case, they were going to jump on Azure and transverse that between their 2 data centers. So again, it's just economics they have to understand, and all of a sudden, they were spending thousands and thousands on carrier services. So if they could reduce that, a $12,000 cabinet was a good deal. But you kind of look at it, and again, that's where that cost of real estate, but interconnections, and I think edge sites is what was discussed as well here a little bit. But understanding what that is and what you're really buying is I think what we're trying to say there.
Jeff kind of talked about it a little bit too early on, is understanding what all these costs are, right? And this is a real estate show, right? So as the real estate negotiations are happening here, understanding all these costs and what does it really mean, especially as you're going into a cloud or going into a colo, understand what's this, what's that, what's this, what's that, and what is your water usage, what is your power usage, what is your, am I paying for that, are you paying for that, where are all these network costs coming, that it adds up, and it adds up quick.
Very good. And then Tom, I think you're going to talk a little bit about future operators.
Sure, yeah. So from an operations standpoint, right, I think it's getting in, knowing what's happening, right? So what's your SLA if you're in a colo? What's your SLA in the cloud? What's your SLA if you're an enterprise and it's facilities team versus IT team, and what's happening? So do you know what's going on there? The smart buildings are just getting better and better and better. We're getting more power management at the racks, at the server level, temperature and cooling right there at each servers and things. We had talked about in the past, everybody would go into those colos saying, on an average, I'm going to give you X kW per cabinet, and it's going to be 53 degrees in there, no big deal, right? So that's on average, which doesn't mean a thing if this one cabinet is overheating and it's out of power, and when the power fails, now that one goes away. That guy's going to be angry, even though don't worry about it, the average is fine. So I think it's, in the future, we're going to get more and more monitoring down to the rack level, down to the cabinet level, getting that knowledge to the right person, right? Because we can all collect data and pay for the data, but what are you doing with it? And how are you monitoring it? And how is that coming back to the business case, right? So we can get all this data and all these reports and things, but if nobody knows how to read it, nobody knows what it's going to look like. What is the virtualization percentage? How much utilization are we using at these racks? What are the temperatures that we're seeing? And when it gets up to this temperature, should I be concerned? Should I not be concerned? Who knows these things, right? You got to get an expert in there that's going to read all this data and look at it, right? Because these IT teams have way too much to do and are way too busy with the important stuff of keeping the things running. But over here, that's telling us, guess what? The cold aisle is 100 degrees. Somebody should care. And what are you doing with it? So it's getting that good monitoring in there, making sure it's getting updated, making sure it's getting viewed by someone and alerting to the right people. So we're just going to see more and more and more of that. And it was talked about today that a lot of these facilities have that in place and they're monitoring, right? Getting the facilities management team to go in there and do that and look at all that stuff. But are you looking at it as well? Because at the end of the day, who gets fired if that server overheats, right? Is it the facility monitor? Sure, maybe, or you get $10 of a service charge or whatever, but what does that cost the business on the overscale, right? So as we look at these downtimes, as we look at just the equipment starting to malfunction, what's happening to it? And I think that's, you know, one of the other things too, as we talk in the next slide here about just that predictive analysis, right? Is when these servers are seeing higher and higher temperatures, which I'm all for, right? It makes me a heck of a lot more efficient as the cooling guy. But it gets closer and closer to that, okay, it says it can run just fine at 110 degrees, but will it fail sooner? Or what if we keep it at 80 degrees versus 70 degrees? That's just fine, and the thing can run at its sweet spot. So getting more and more of this predictive analysis, using AI to really see, especially if you have millions of servers out there like these hyperscales do, how often are they failing and why are they failing? And getting that predictive analysis so that you can proactively replace this equipment. And it's not just the IT stuff, right? It's the power and cooling stuff as well. Looking at the UPS equipment and understanding that even though the batteries say that they're 10-year batteries, they usually just, you know, we got to replace them at 5 years or 7 years or whatever. We're getting more life out of these batteries than these ones. Having those ideas and not just when it crashes, we'll deal with it, right? When the fan stops working, we'll replace it. No big deal, right? So it's getting the operators of these data centers way more information and the understanding of what it's going to do, right? We talk about machine learning and how these things are getting better and better. There's a lot of the infrastructure equipment out there that's already doing a lot of this thinking and understanding. And when I do this, then this happens. And where am I? You know, chiller optimization, for instance, of running the pump a little bit faster and then running the temperature a little bit lower. And now that's more of a sweet spot in the chiller, which is the largest cooling user. So looking at these different things and watching the systems interact and how they play together and getting that real-time knowledge so that you can make these changes on the fly before there's an issue.
Yeah, and I think the operators become smarter and smarter, right? And they're trying to be more energy efficient. They're trying to use less water. They're doing a lot of things that we talked about earlier. Some of the other presenters did.
Now, before we go to the future here, maybe we can get some more comments and questions and things here. I know Jeff wants us to go to at least 2:30, I think is what he said, just because some of the other presentations went a little shy. So I just want to make sure we can stretch this out for another couple hours here. So please keep the comments in here. I know Bill's got stuff about cooling, which is great from the last one, but or snarky comments or something.
Yeah. Bring it on.
Nobody's awake.
Yeah, all good. So Colleen, I think teed this up again. Tom and I put our heads together and talked about, we want to hit a little bit on the future, right? And now we're, what does that look like? And we took three perspectives, right? What's the user perspective? What is the business perspective from a cloud perspective, and then a data center perspective. Again, I think these were opened up and touched on a little bit in the discussion earlier, but from a user perspective, really, right? There is an expectation that I can do and will do my work from anywhere that I want, right? If I want to go to be, I know people that decided to work from Colorado because that was they always wanted to do that. So they did, right? People worked at their cabin, but that expectation is not going to change, right? And one of the things we were talking about is the increased expectation, right? I think plenty of people were happy that things generally just work and they could work from remote wherever they were, and it worked, right? And in some cases, like we had some examples where maybe a little bit of fine tuning for a couple of weeks or even a month, but it generally worked and businesses were able to continue. But we think the bar is going to continue to increase from here, right? And that's why I think some of those big players are coming into the market, because there's just demand that I'm going to have a better performant solution. My application is going to work. And it's going to, when I do the drop down, I want to see what's coming from that retail that banking, whatever application, and then mobile everything, right? We're definitely seeing that whole, everybody's expecting to be able to do it on my laptop or do it on my iPad or do it on my phone, right? Everything is going to be accessible via mobile. I think there was definitely some opening to sustainability, but we definitely see the eco-based consumer. And again, now them making financial or making purchasing decisions based on what vendors or what manufacturers or maybe what retailers that they're consuming these decisions from. They'll be making that based on how are they positioned in a sustainable environment, and that is again fueling that sustainability that many people talked about.
Yeah, and we are seeing it from the hyperscales, right? They're publishing their sustainability efforts and their programs to get more people to say, yes, I want to get on board with that and be a part of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a big portion of the conversation. I think that was mentioned earlier. Broadband expansion, again, just using the example, used to hate to go to my parents' cabin and man, just to do anything out there was about impossible. We have fiber now, and man, I could do anything I needed to or wanted to from there. So again, that broadband expansion. Again, Starlink is coming, so that's going to solve everybody's problems.
Satellites, yeah, just make it work. And I think the big thing is, slow is the new down, right? When I go on to Netflix, I want that show right now. When I go to that retail site, I want it to work because I'm in the buying mode right now. I need to hit yes. So if there is any latency, you're losing customers, right? And they talk about it all day long.
Yeah, and I think a little bit, I think about my wife, and I think about her. She used to go on Saturday morning with her mom or some in-laws, and they would go out shopping on a Saturday morning. Well, now I see her with her iPad on the couch, making purchasing decisions on what shoes she's going to buy.
Yeah.
So again, mobile, again,
and it's
always
also,
on.
It's not just the selling aspect, it's your employees doing that work, right? So we had talked about people working from home. Can they get right onto the server and do their job throughout the entire company? If it's the person putting together meeting minutes, can they do it right away, or is it going to take them an extra 10, 20 minutes because everything's so slow? And the faster we can get, the more performance, the better we can get down, more done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was touched on, again, the cloud perspective of this. Again, the good news is that I think the cloud vendors are hungry to get into the tier 2 market of Minnesota. So that's exciting. I think it's only going to fuel some of that. And I like the idea of the popcorn popping. I could just see that happening. So it's exciting. Again, support. The good news is that they're competing with each other. So if AWS comes to town, and AWS and Azure are definitely in town already, so it's not that they're not. GCP, Google is here as well, but all they have is an edge site. And again, those servers and storage and the things you're really bouncing off of are literally in Chicago or Iowa. So again, that's not where we are presently. We are seeing, from an enterprise standpoint, applications, the new applications they're talking about and building are cloud aware. So they're going to be more built so they can be on-site or off-site. Old applications are being refactored. And what I mean by refactored, you think about the engine in a car that was going down the road. Well, they're now building another car to the left of that existing car, and they're putting in a new engine. They're putting in, they're maybe reusing the wheels and the transmission. So it does all the same stuff, but again, being refactored or rebuilt for cloud. Again, what that means is in 2 to 3 years, the cloud adoption is just gonna continue to go up. Talk a little bit about his infrastructure as code. Again, it really doesn't matter as much to the real estate people out there, but again, it's that movement of workloads, and I'll show an illustration that kind of talks about how we see that working long term, right? Again, moving, where is it today, right? I maybe have traditional data centers. I might have some little instances in the cloud. So the first discussion is, hey, what cloud am I going to go to? Maybe having some different workloads. I'm probably running some SaaS kind of things already. And then really we see, okay, now I want to buy something else. or consume something that maybe AWS is not as good at consuming or providing. I might also want to have Azure. So now I have multi-clouds. I still have my data center. I might want to switch, and we're getting more customers that are, I'm over in one, I'm spending more than I want. I want to have the ability to have that as code that I can spin it up in AWS. I can now spin that same environment in a quick fashion up in Azure. And ultimately, where we're starting to see some of those conversations going is having the right workloads in the right places. Cloud isn't the end all. We're definitely seeing some customers that are now having that same kind of cloud capability on their data centers or within those colos. So again, that's still, and I think someone touched on it earlier a little bit, what is the most cost-effective, highest performance available? And that really is what we're seeing our customers, where we think it's going to go is that they might be consuming that hybrid IT environment, and that might be in one cloud, it might be in two clouds. And it likely for a period of time, it's going to be in a colo, in a data center, and likely it's still going to remain in a building and in a data center some.
And you and I had talked about it a little bit, right? I think it's you got to look at the differences between these, right? It's not just I go to a cloud because they're all the same, right? There's cost models differences, there's performance differences. So it's maybe you do put some in AWS because it does this and some over here. It's no different than shopping at different stores, right? This store offers this and this store offers this. They might offer somewhat similar, but maybe I need this for a little bit and that for a little bit. So it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of looking at it, and all the capabilities are changing every day, right?
Yep. And with automation, again, abstracting. So virtualization, that's something hit the data center environment years ago. But again, we're seeing automation play that same role in that abstracting dependencies. So I can have workloads moving in data centers, in colos, in cloud environments.
So why would I come back? I mean, isn't the cloud the place everybody's got to go, and it's the end all be all, and it solves everybody's problems?
Good question. I think some of that is really around, hey, if I really have a steady app and it's doing a certain function, it's providing what it needs to provide, cloud is not always the cheapest option to do that. Now, there's definitely some services that make a whole lot of sense there, but again, good operators that have good sites, good energy consumption, really know their cost, can run that very cost effectively on site. So again, we've seen some great operators doing really, really good things.
Yeah, know your redundancy,
absolutely. Make sure your failover and again, you have connections to those users as well as the people that are consuming your services. Again, the future from a data center perspective, again, that user experience increasing, right? Expectations are going up there. We talked about that in the digital world. Support for the large, fast moving. We're seeing big blocks of data center consumption coming in where they're putting in 20 servers, 50 servers to support mobile environments. Again, that just moving very fast in enterprises. Again, where do I connect to cloud? There was some discussion around edges. I think quite a bit of conversation around carbon and sustainability matters, right? And definitely seeing that in a lot of data centers. Again, and then embracing that intelligent data center and then understanding your costs.
So if in the future here, I have a data center now and I'm moving stuff all over the place and I'm moving it faster, what does my existing data center look like? I mean, can I just downsize the heck out of it? Or in the future, is stuff going to come back and I need to be able to quickly provision power and cooling and space? How do we work through those flexibilities? And is it multiple data centers that I'm spinning up myself? A lot of these big enterprises that just started throwing stuff out, if they're bringing it back, where is it going?
Yeah. So from a real estate perspective, I think there's definitely a need for critical spaces. And one of the things that we're seeing in all of the sites that a customer may have, they need to reliably get to cloud, right? Or get to those co-locations, whatever the case, but again, reliably doing that. So we're seeing a number of data centers that maybe were a certain size and now they downsize that, but it still exists some. But again, that duality of multiple points of entrances and a lot of things that are important to data center, I think is important to real estate and real estate purchasing, where, hey, how am I connected? What's the redundancy that I have? That kind of thing. And then again, if you have an understanding and a good handle on your environment, you can make those conscious decisions. Hey, these few applications make more sense to run on site rather than maybe in the cloud, or vice versa. I'm going to consume something because it's far cheaper to spin something up in that environment. In data warehouse is one example. I had a number of CIOs say, I'm never going to buy a data warehouse, costs 500 to $1.5 million to spin that up as a data warehouse. And it's always not terribly clear how the business users analysis is going to be done. Whereas I can go buy that and consume it as a service. And now I let those business intelligence folks jump on that hardware and go to town, but they're getting value, and then they now just have to be more disciplined about making sure they shut off the lights when they're done using it, which is another circle of things that we're definitely seeing.
That's your monitoring, right? Making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yep, and just like anything, turning off the lights when you're done with it. All right, and then Tom, you're just going to circle back.
Sure, yeah. So we flew through this pretty quick, and there's been just a flood of comments through the chat. So I appreciate everybody for. Maybe it's not refreshing here or something, or maybe maybe our camera's not on. But I think it's, as we talk through the future, right? What changed, right? And there were big steps. It wasn't just the day-to-day that we deal with COVID in this last year. There was some data center changes, and really things happened, and everybody had to work from home and quickly get up to speed of doing it different. But like he said, I mean, that's hate the new normal, but it now proves that you can do it. So why not do it better, right? It now proves that we can work from home. So why not work faster from home? So, and that gets to the cost modeling too, right? As we're looking at all of these different things we can do, now do we want to send things to the cloud, and what does that work, and how does that look, and what's our overall operational cost versus capital cost, and maybe just that quick spin it up and bring it back, pay for what I use, understanding that and keeping people in track of it and knowing where your money's going. Obviously, that's what we all care about too. So, and then what are the operators looking like? It's not just a lights out data center always, right? And as we're moving things around, are we doing it efficiently? Are we understanding where our equipment is at all times, right? As we're spinning things up quicker, you do have to spin them down, and do you know where things are going, and do the users know where they're going? And are you monitoring not only where the applications live, but what their health is? Are they in need of replacement in the future? As we talk about that machine learning, as doing those predictive analyses, where is it coming and where is it going? And the future is just going to keep going, right? The data keeps growing, like we had talked about throughout this whole day. We're going to use more and more data centers. Everybody talked about the efficiency and how data centers are going to get smaller because everything's getting more and more efficient. But I think we did that for a little bit, and now it's booming like crazy because there's just so many more things we're doing, which means so many more of machines in a data center somewhere, right? So we talk about cloud being this thing that nobody knows about, but it's a data center, and it needs real estate, and it needs things to it. It needs power, energy, everything. So that was our quick case study of case studies. Reach out to us. We appreciate the entire day. It's been good to get everybody here together again, and we wish we were in person. But this has been a good little talk and get things going through here. So.
Yeah, I think it was just interesting to hear the different presentations, and it definitely, it seemed a lot of us were on the same page, right? What is changing, right? But it's changing for the good, and I think Minnesota has a great opportunity. And I think from a real estate standpoint, again, understanding, what are the factors that are important to customers? Really what it comes right down to.
Yeah, and this isn't a typical real estate build, right? So get your experts involved. There's a ton of people in this webinar, that we see on all these things that are just they live data centers. So you need to have experts. Otherwise, you fall into some of these traps, and you end up paying way more for real estate, way more for network costs and everything. And it's just, if you don't know what you're doing, get some partners that do.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Tom and Keith. Awesome job. Fantastic presentation. Not only that, but you guys are also have futures in comedy as well too. In case this engineering business doesn't work for either of you guys. But anyways, thank you so much again for everything, and thank you for all of you for attending the webinar today. We will be posting this up onto this site here in about 48 hours or so. So you can watch the replay of this webinar. So feel free to check back on this lobby page, right? This lobby page with that contact information for all of our speakers right here. We're going to have a link right here to rewatch this webinar if you choose so. And then once again, thank you very much to all of our sponsors today. T5, Connexus Energy, AFCOM, Excel Energy, City of Elk River, Great River Energy, and Anoka County. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing everybody in person very, very soon. Make it a good day, everyone. Thank you.